Please come to the hospital right away. Sarah is in critical condition. I pleaded urgently over the phone, my voice shaking with fear for our 6-year-old daughter's life. But instead of rushing to our daughter's side, my husband's harsh words cut through the line like a knife. Stop with the lies and using our daughter's life as bait. You're the worst, he accused callously. I'm not lying. Please believe me, I cried out desperately, met only with a dismissive click of the tongue and his cold promise to have one more drink before considering coming back. By the time I get there, Sarah will probably be fine. Stop bothering me, he spat before hanging up abruptly. I crumpled against the hospital corridor wall, my strength failing as I whispered, Sarah. My name is Holly, and I'm 31 years old. 6 years ago, I married John, who was 42 at the time, after meeting him at work where he was my boss. His competence, fairness, and charm won me over, and after confessing my feelings, we began dating. A year later, he proposed, and I remember tears of joy streaming down my face. Shortly after our wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. We're going to be amazing parents, I remember saying, filled with genuine happiness at the prospect of building a family with the man I admired. But after our daughter Sarah was born, everything changed. John grew distant and began belittling me, dismissing my needs and accusing me of exaggerating when I was unwell or needed help around the house. Nights were the hardest. When Sarah cried, his impatience showed as he'd snap, "She's annoying, put her to sleep quickly." Many times, tears replaced the joy I had imagined for our family life. You're a stay-at-home mom, and you can't even manage the kids while doing your chores. Damn, I picked the wrong one. John's words cut through me sharply. Why would you say that? We're a couple. We're in this together, I protested. I'm out working hard all day. Don't burden me with housework. And your constant complaints about being sick or not getting enough sleep because of the kids. I don't buy it, he retorted coldly. I'm not lying about any of this. Besides, Sarah is our daughter. You need to be involved in raising her too, I pleaded, hoping to reach him. If you need help that badly, hire a housekeeper. That's if you can afford it, of course, he dismissed callously. His accusations stung, but what hurt more was his indifference towards our daughter. The thought of divorce crossed my mind, but as a stay-at-home mom, leaving with Sarah felt daunting. Still, I resolved to be the parent Sarah deserved, one who would protect her no matter what. If something ever happened, it seemed Sarah vaguely understood that her father, John, and I weren't getting along well. Despite this, she grew into a kind child, often gently stroking my head and saying, "Thanks for everything, Mom." Each time, I would lovingly hug Sarah and respond, "Mommy loves you so much, Sarah." But then, suddenly, something precious to me was taken away. It happened on Sarah's 6th birthday. The three of us had planned to celebrate together. I had been busy with preparations all morning and was nearly finished by 3 p.m. Just as I was about to leave to buy her birthday cake, I received a call from John. I got roped into a night out with my colleagues. "I'll be home," John's voice came through the phone. "Wait, today is Sarah's birthday. You promised you would be home," I pleaded. "Can't be helped. I was invited out. I'm quite popular, you know," John replied with a smug laugh. "Popular, my foot. They probably just want you to pick up the tab," I retorted, frustration creeping into my voice. I've told him countless times to stop footing the bill for his colleagues' nights out, but John never listens. He just says, "Who else is going to pay? I'm the boss." "Can't you please come home for Sarah? She's been looking forward to celebrating her birthday with you," I begged. "Stop nagging. I'll get her a present. That should be enough," John dismissed. "Fine, whatever," I snapped, cutting the call abruptly with a loud slam of the receiver. Relief washed over me momentarily. I shouldn't let this get to me. Today is all about Sarah. I have to keep smiling, I thought to myself as I walked into the local bakery and picked out a strawberry cake, Sarah's favorite. With the cake in hand, all that was left was to wait for Sarah to return home. But as the evening wore on and the sun started to set, Sarah still hadn't come home. I tried to reassure myself, maybe she had lost track of time while playing with her friends. Just as I began to consider searching the neighborhood or calling the police, the phone rang. It was the police on the line. "Holly, there's been a traffic accident." "What about Sarah? Is Sarah okay?" "They've taken her to the hospital, but she's still unconscious. We're sorry for the delay in contacting you. It took some time to confirm her identity. I have to go to the hospital right away," the police officer informed me urgently. I regretted not leaving Sarah a note with my contact information, but dwelling on it wouldn't help now. Rushing to the hospital, my face drained of color, I silently prayed, "Please, God, let her be okay." At the hospital, a nurse broke the news to me. Sarah was in critical condition. The strength drained from my body, and I collapsed to the floor. Just this morning, she had been fine, going to school like any other day. This wasn't supposed to happen. I struggled to convince myself it was all a terrible dream. But the steady beeping of the machines monitoring my daughter's unconscious form brought me back to harsh reality. "I need to call John," I muttered, stepping out of the room to dial my husband's number. "What? It's you again? Don't bother me while I'm out drinking." John's voice slurred through the phone. "Sarah got in an accident and she's at the hospital. It could be serious. Get here now." John scoffed, dismissing it. "Yeah, right. Another one of your stories. You're just upset because I missed her birthday. Stop making things up." "I'm not lying. Please come to the hospital now. Sarah's in critical condition," I pleaded desperately. "Stop holding a grudge against me. You're being ridiculous," John retorted callously. "Please, just come. Sarah might not make it," I cried, tears streaming down my face. I found myself pleading through the tears, overwhelmed not just by sadness but by the disbelief that my husband could accuse me of lying and show no concern for our daughter in such a dire moment. Fine, I understand. I'll have one more drink, then I'll come back. By then, Sarah will have miraculously woken up and be peacefully asleep in bed. I'm tired of your lies. Don't call me again. Bye." "Wait," I shouted, but he had already hung up. In the hospital room, I sat, tears streaming down my face as I waited for Sarah to wake up. But she never did. Her birthday became the day she left us forever. "Why? Please open your eyes," I pleaded, my voice trembling with grief. No matter how much I called out to her, no matter how many times I touched Sarah's lifeless body, she never responded with a smile. Sarah was such a good girl. She was shy, but always caring and thoughtful towards others. A true angel. Why did she have to lose her life, Sarah? I collapsed in tears in the hospital room, oblivious to the people around me. In the end, my husband never showed up at the hospital that day. On the day of the funeral, the sky hung heavy with clouds, as if it too mourned. John's colleagues and bosses attended the service, faces familiar from earlier encounters, but this was not how I had imagined meeting them again. Throughout the day, my friends took turns consoling John and me, though approaching me was difficult in my weakening state. Each time someone spoke to John, he put on a dramatic show of tears, lamenting, "I can't believe Sarah's gone," and then shifting blame with, "If my wife had called me sooner that day, maybe I could have seen her while she was still alive. You're the one who accused me of lying and didn't bring me home. You're not even crying for real," I observed quietly, numb to any anger toward him. All I wanted was to bid Sarah a peaceful farewell with all my heart. As the funeral approached its conclusion, John leaned in and whispered to me, "All right, now it's time for us to get divorced. You'll finally be free." Taken aback by his sudden statement, I glared at him, biting my lip, but he quickly excused himself to smoke outside. Amidst the whirlpool of emotions as I continued to express gratitude to the attendees, a woman approached me. "Holly, my deepest condolences. I never imagined something like this would happen," said Kay, a colleague of John's and my closest friend from my office days. She came close and gently rubbed my shoulder. In that moment, I felt a slight sense of solace in my heart. 3 days after the funeral, I received a call from Kay. A few days later, we met at a cafe near my home. She was very concerned about me, asking if I was eating properly and sleeping enough. Her caring gesture meant the world to me. To be honest, I hate being the bearer of bad news, but on the day Holly had that accident, I was with John and some colleagues, and I saw when Sean picked up your call. "Is that so?" I replied, urging him to continue. "You should have pushed him harder to go to the hospital. I blame myself for not being more insistent." "You don't need to apologize, Kay. I know you encouraged him to go, and that means a lot." "Okay, I'm sorry." And I was hesitant to bring this up, but Kay also mentioned John's recent behavior. She suspects he might be having an affair with a young colleague named Lee at work. After everyone left that night, it seems he was alone with Lee. I hate to say it, but there have been rumors at the office about John and Lee. People think they might be having an affair. I see. The realization that I was the only one unaware of this, manipulated by John, filled me with anger. Okay, there's something I want to ask you. Yeah. You want to gather evidence of John's infidelity, right? I'll help. Okay. My longtime friend from my office days already knew what I needed. With case support, I resolved to gather evidence of my husband's affair at work. A week later, Kate provided more details about John's affair. She revealed that John and his mistress openly flirted at work, often leaving together after hours and disappearing into a hotel district. Kate had followed them, capturing photos and videos of their encounters. Thank you for all of this, Kate, I said, struggling to hold back tears as I forced a smile at her words of concern. Holly, are you okay? If there's anything else I can do to help, just let me know. That night, I confronted my husband with signed divorce papers. Let's get a divorce, please, I told him firmly. Lucky me. I wanted to break up with you too, he replied callously. So, I'm asking for $30,000 in compensation from both of you. What? That's too much just for a divorce, he protested. You're all about money, John retorted defensively. I also know about your affair and I have solid proof. I showed him the photos and videos of him with Lee that Kay had captured. There was a brief moment of shock on his face before he regained his composure and glared at me. Very clever. You're quite the intimidating woman. Anyone can doctor photos these days. Which detective agency did you hire? He scoffed. I anticipated you'd say that. Just then, Kay walked in from the adjacent room. Concerned for my well-being, she insisted on staying close by and had been waiting there. My husband was visibly startled by her unexpected presence. These photos and videos are genuine. I took them myself, Kay affirmed firmly. You're the absolute worst. Our daughter has passed away, and you're cheating too. If you don't confess, I'll report it to our boss. Please don't do that. So, you admit to cheating then? Yeah, I guess, my husband admitted reluctantly, his face contorted with discomfort. All right, so we're getting divorced. Make sure you pay me alimony. Despite admitting to the affair, John still refused to pay alimony. If you're going to be this stubborn, I'll consult a lawyer. Do you, a housewife, even have the money to hire a lawyer? I've been working online all this time, saving up to support Sarah on my own in case we ever got divorced. I intended to use that money for her, but now I'll use it against you. Until now, John had looked down on me. Even when I confronted him with proof of his affair, he appeared unfazed. But suddenly, panic crept into his expression. Wait, hold on. This is some kind of joke, right? Huh? If you think this is a joke, try me. I won't settle for a half-hearted agreement, I stated coldly. At my firm words, John dropped to his knees, pleading desperately. I only started seeing Lee because she made advances towards me. It's not my fault, he began, offering excuses. I can't afford to pay alimony. Please reconsider. He bowed his head to the floor, tears streaming down his face. Yeah, and I'm sure those tears are just for show. Goodbye, I said, brushing off my husband as I grabbed the Boston bag I had packed and left home with Kay. Later, I hired a lawyer and successfully filed for divorce and damages. I managed to secure $25,000 in damages from Lee as well. John lost his family, his money, and was promptly dumped by Lee. Who said I'd only dated you because you had money? Lee retorted. I never expected things to end up like this, John lamented. And when our affair at the office was exposed, we were called in by the CEO, and as Kay told me, transferred to different rural areas. Following my divorce, I moved back to my parents' house and continued working from home. Sarah was laid to rest in our family cemetery back home. While I still mourned deeply, I resolved to live out my remaining years quietly and peacefully.
You're not related by blood, so I'm cutting ties. The property is all mine. On a cold winter day, my husband suddenly passed away. During his funeral, I was shaken by the sudden words of my stepson. I thought I had raised him dearly. Even though our relationship wasn't the best, I believed there was some affection reaching him. His words at the funeral made me give up on everything. So, I understand, that's truly how you feel. I vowed not to get involved with my stepson anymore. However, the one who broke that promise and contacted me was him. The next day, my son called dozens of times, but I ignored all of them. See, he did contact me. Yes, I knew this would happen because I knew the truth. Wake up. Come on. How many times do I have to turn off the alarm? The snooze function is useless. Sorry. I'm just not good in the mornings. Hurry and get ready. Breakfast is ready. Yes, I'm still tired. My day begins with handling my morning weak husband. It's a hectic daily life, but it's happy. Phew, it'd be nice if you woke up easier. I need coffee to wake up, and I have to work hard today. There's no time. But eat without rushing. I know. Married for 15 years, this interaction is normal. The comfort of these casual exchanges motivates me to keep going today. Is he still sleeping? I called out to him, but no response. He refers to my son, who is my husband's child from a previous relationship. At 45, living with my 50-year-old self-employed husband and 23-year-old stepson. I support my busy husband by keeping the house as a homemaker. Really? That's frustrating. What should we do? There's a certain tension only during this conversation. I was desperate to ease the atmosphere. Look at the clock. It's this late already. I'm off. You seem busier lately, but please don't overdo it. My husband is very kind, but there are things he keeps to himself. Or struggles to express, so I try to notice even the slightest changes. Don't worry, I won't overdo it. I don't have time to break down. See you. Though it felt somewhat forced. I didn't want to nag too much and sent him off with a smile. Take care. I was comforted by my kind and cheerful husband from the morning. Now, I must get on with the chores. As I was gearing up, my stepson came stumbling in, still half asleep. I closed my eyes to his unkempt look and greeted him with a smile. Good morning. Breakfast? Should we air out the blankets since it's nice weather? Sigh. As I tried to start a conversation, he intentionally let out a big sigh. It sounded more like he was pressing me not to talk to him. After 15 years, the interaction was still awkward, or rather, it didn't feel like an interaction at all. I wondered if I was being too reserved. Make sure to hydrate. You lose a lot of water while you sleep. I threw out almost nagging words, hoping for some response, but it didn't go well. I tried to speak without letting on that I was choosing my words. I just wanted to talk, but it never worked out. Ignoring was a daily occurrence. And he would glare at me as I kept asking questions. At least he wasn't shouting or rampaging, I told myself. Trying to console myself that it could be worse, but I eventually lost the words to speak. He rummaged through the fridge, grabbed a drink and a sweet bun, and went back to his room. In the end, we didn't exchange a word. Today was no good either. The distance between me and my stepson kept growing over the years. Considering his age and all, I was sorting through various emotions, while suddenly reminiscing about the past. When we got married, my stepson was 7. And I was very confused about how to interact with him. Becoming the parent of a 7-year-old all of a sudden was, in a sense, terrifying. I think my stepson felt the same. Becoming a family with a woman he hardly knew. We had met several times before the marriage, but he never got used to me. And we relied on my husband's suggestion that it would be okay to gradually get used to each other after the marriage. It must have been a huge burden for a child. I struggled not to act too parental, hoping to break the ice. Sometimes, I think this unnaturalness created a gap. Hey, why don't you talk a bit? We can't have fun conversations if you don't say anything. It's okay not to call me Mom. let's get along. Well, it's understandable. It's a shock to suddenly have more family. Let's get along slowly, the three of us. Right? My husband said this, looking apologetic toward me. It was tough not having the stepson warm up to me. But I knew worrying wouldn't help. So I did my best to close the gap and get him used to me, supported by my husband. Shall we play together? What do you like? I want Dad. Only Dad. I'd like to play together, but Dad is busy with work, right? No. Go away. Ball. So, let's play soccer. You're not capable anyway. Get out of here. I didn't know what to do, and I told myself not to act like a mother. While I was overwhelmed with the unfamiliar task of parenting. There were times when I thought it was growth just to have him talk back, a carefree idea. As time passed, I hoped things would work out as he grew. But life doesn't always go smoothly. I was naive. As he became a middle and high school student, not quite a delinquent. But he hung around every day without studying much. And my husband and I were at our wits' end. Even my kind husband raised his voice sometimes. Where have you been until this time? Shut up. You're not really worried. What I do is none of your business. Not our business. How can you say that? Why can't you at least tell us where you are? But there are social commitments for young people, right? If we keep allowing that, there's no end to it. Making us worry without any contact and then talking back to us. Clicking your tongue. I'm getting frustrated. Well, my bad for being such a son. Bang. I can't forget the sound of the door slamming that time. Nor can I forget how pitiful I felt for only being able to respond in such a templated manner. Should I have scolded him properly? Even if I thought so, I couldn't easily change my way of thinking. Despite various troubles, my feelings of caring for my stepson remained unchanged. And I, ever hopeful, waited with a birthday cake I made for him. Tick-tock, tick-tock. I somewhat knew it would turn out this way. But if there was even a slight hope, maybe. I clung to that faint hope and continued to wait. It's already this late, maybe he got involved in something dangerous. It's always like this. I'm truly sorry. You're making such an effort. I just got too excited, don't worry about it. What I'm really worried about is whether he's safe. Despite thinking it might be annoying, I was too worried and made a call. Ring, ring, ring. Of course, he's not answering the phone. I called several times, but eventually, it went to voicemail. He's old enough to prefer spending time with friends over celebrating with family. Which is natural. I should have realized it sooner. Let's eat the cake tomorrow. My husband sighed deeply and said nothing more. In the end, my stepson didn't come home and was out all night. Since then, the gap has not been filled, in fact, it has only widened. There were many troubles. Just thinking about it drains me. Despite being disliked, I lived my life trying to be as close to my stepson as possible, hoping we could gradually get along. I cherished raising him in my own way. On another cold winter day, my husband suddenly died. That. The cause was a myocardial infarction. Likely compounded by his usual overwork and stress, I was told by the doctor. Although I was confused, I understood that his work situation was severe. And there were parts one could accept. If only I had been more supportive. I regretted not being able to support him more. Without time to grieve, I arranged my husband's funeral. Keeping busy helped distract me a bit. The funeral proceeded without any issues, and I barely kept myself together as the chief mourner. I had to be strong. I couldn't just keep grieving for the sake of my stepson left behind. I kept telling myself that. Everybody, I have a few words to say. My husband was a very kind and cheerful man. Despite his life still having so much potential, he unfortunately fell ill suddenly and closed the curtain on his life. I never thought I'd have to undertake such a duty so soon. I continued my speech with these thoughts in my heart. A good husband and father, he cherished his family despite being busy. And he spent time with us. I want to live on, supporting each other with my son, holding on to the happiness my husband gave us. Thank you all for coming today, despite your busy schedules. As I finished my speech as the chief mourner, suddenly, my stepson started to speak. I couldn't comprehend what was happening, as it was so sudden. I'm cutting ties with her. This person is no longer a parent or anything to me. A stranger. Pointing at me, my stepson declared that. Wait. What are you saying? Shut up. Be quiet. I was at a loss for words at my stepson's shocking announcement. To sever ties suddenly, and at such an occasion. I tried to stay calm, but it was impossible to remain composed. And I felt like I might collapse from the psychological strain. Regardless of my state, my stepson continued speaking indifferently. Dad never cared about her. He didn't acknowledge her as his wife. Only saw her as a mere housekeeper. She's not family. The surrounding crowd couldn't hide their murmurs. I was shaken by the words that my husband didn't care for me. But that quickly turned into anger. I retorted sharply. That's not true. Dad cared for and cherished me properly. What were you looking at? Both you and I were cherished by him. Dad wasn't the person you describe. Hearing this, my stepson half mocked me with a smile and pulled a paper from his breast pocket. Can you still say such platitudes after seeing this? I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the paper. This is your marriage certificate with Dad. Dad never submitted this. This is the definitive proof that he didn't care about you. You're the one who doesn't know anything about Dad, aren't you? No way. If you doubt it, check it yourself. Saying that, he threw the paper at me. I hesitantly picked it up and verified it. It was indeed the marriage certificate my husband and I had filled out. Just as my stepson said. I couldn't stop shivering. Not from anger, but from a surge of sadness. We weren't married. Just as my stepson said, I had always been a stranger to my husband. My emotions were a mess, and I couldn't think straight. That's why I'm cutting ties with you. The property is all mine. Well, you're not family or anything, are you? You can't say anything back, can you? As I stood pale and trembling, my stepson cornered me as if seizing the moment. I've never liked you. I tolerated you because I thought you were just a housekeeper necessary for my father's work. But I'm done with this charade. I feel relieved. Now get out of my sight. I thought I had raised him well. Even if not as a mother. I believed he had accepted me as part of the family. Learning what was truly in his heart, I felt despair. Was I really never connected to my husband or stepson? My heart fell so much during the funeral that I forgot we were at one. I gave up on everything in despair. Was love this fragile? Or was our family nothing more than a pretense? At that moment, I couldn't think of anything else. I understand. I don't want anything, and I will no longer have anything to do with you. I vowed never to interact with my stepson again. If freeing myself from this shredded mess of feelings meant letting everything else go, so be it. Thank you for your efforts, housekeeper. Days after the shocking funeral, I was tidying up the house, preparing to leave it behind. I wanted to free myself from this situation as soon as possible. Was my entire married life a lie? I muttered alone in the now empty and somewhat lonely room. That's when it happened. I found a letter in my husband's study. A letter, for me? Wanting to erase everything, I hesitated for a moment about whether to read it. But fearing regret, I started to read the letter, which contained all my husband's feelings. So that was it. With surprise, the letter dissolved all the resentments in my heart. And I cried while holding it. It was the moment everything made sense. I finally understood why my husband hadn't submitted our marriage certificate. Understanding everything, I felt pathetic for having taken my stepson's words at face value and despaired over such a piece of paper without fully trusting my husband until the end. A week later, I moved out of the house I had lived in with my husband. It was sad to leave the home where we shared so many ups and downs. But part of me felt refreshed to be free from that stepson who trampled all over the love I had given. I never wanted to deal with someone who couldn't even understand his own father properly. Well, he's a stranger now, so there shouldn't be any more interaction, I thought. However, the next day, I saw an unbelievable number of calls from my stepson. He must have learned the truth. After all that bravado, to contact me so easily. I felt both astonished and somewhat refreshed. Ignoring dozens of calls, I realized it was all pointless. The name of my stepson kept appearing on my phone to an annoying extent. I should have quickly deleted his number and blocked him. Though I thought there would be no more interactions, knowing my stepson. He might overturn any situation if it suited him. His predictable actions were almost amusing. Even after declaring he would cut ties, he contacts me this insistently. Because the situation has changed. How ridiculous. I muttered to my continuously ringing phone. My stepson wouldn't give up. Why couldn't he use this persistence for something else? He must live a life depending on others. No matter how many times he called, I had no intention of answering. Full of anger and anxiety, he must be overwhelmed. But that had nothing to do with me. He chose to be a stranger to me. What could he possibly want from me now? No matter what he said or did, my feelings wouldn't waver anymore. Ignoring the incessant ringing of the phone felt good. I felt cruel enough to not want to be on my bad side. I realized how much a person could dismiss others. Finally, the phone stopped ringing abruptly. He gave up. Seriously, what a nuisance. Relieved that the nuisance calls had ended, my peace was short-lived. An hour later, I was about to have an unwanted reunion. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. No way. But it was exactly that. The house chime was frantically pressed. And as I peered through the door viewer, there stood my stepson with a demonic expression. Wow, he can really go this far. Impressive action in a way. Hey. I know you're there. Open up. His voice betrayed his panic even though he was shouting. You're hiding something. What's going on? Ding dong. Ding dong. Bang. Bang. He even started banging on the door. Such a nuisance. His behavior was like a debt collector's, desperately cornered. But it had nothing to do with me. I didn't want to involve myself. Bang. Bang. I'll break the door down. Open up, hey. Dealing with him was a hassle, but I opened the door, fearing a neighbor might call the police. As soon as I cracked the door, a hand appeared in the gap, pushing it open forcefully. Why didn't you answer the phone? How could you not notice after so many calls? How dull are your senses? This was his opening line upon seeing me. Listening further was unpleasant. I could go on and on with complaints, and I was quite irritated. But losing my composure would make me no better than my stepson. I spoke calmly. What? What do you want? What could a stranger possibly want? I asked with a hint of sarcasm, feeling no sympathy anymore. It's not just about what. You knew everything, didn't you? You hid it all. And you still call yourself a parent? That's the lowest. What? Parent? What convenient talk. He can't take responsibility for his own words. Did he forget how he insulted me in front of everyone and declared I wasn't a parent? I couldn't understand a person like my stepson. Stop being silent. You put me through this. He came at me with childish words and a fierce demeanor. His face so desperate it almost evoked pity. Of course, I knew what he was talking about, but I decided to play dumb. It felt like a waste to engage with him seriously. I don't understand what you want to say. What about that thing? And who are you calling a parent? I don't have any children. I continued to provoke him as he glared at me, grinding his teeth. Actually, I might have had a son once, but that must have been my misunderstanding. So I don't have any children. And I really don't understand what you're trying to say. Sorry. I intended to remain calm. But I realized I might have spoken in a rather childish manner. This was still rather mild, though. Don't play dumb. You knew Dad had a huge debt. How can you act so clueless? There's no way you didn't know something that major about your own spouse. It's truly despicable of you to ignore your own son who is in such trouble. Just because it's inconvenient for you. Which mouth is spewing such nonsense? The desperation on my stepson's face and the absurdity of his accusations were so ridiculous that it was hard to keep from laughing. Of course, I knew about my husband's debt. But this immature retaliation only fueled my anger further. Marriage? You were the one who said I was just a housekeeper and not a parent, right? I was just a housekeeper. A housekeeper doesn't know such things. Too bad. Don't be defiant. What are you talking about? Explain yourself properly. Dealing with my unrelenting stepson was exhausting. Continuing to argue would only lead to an endless back and forth. Wanting to get rid of him quickly, I sighed and reluctantly decided to explain. My husband was self-employed and his business was doing well. We lived a relatively affluent life. Slowly, I told my stepson the truth, as he couldn't believe there was such a large debt. Your father became a guarantor for a friend who was starting a business. But that person vanished, leaving behind a huge debt. Since that person became unreachable, your father had no choice but to pay back the enormous debt. What? A guarantor? That's none of my business. And you knew about it and kept quiet? Don't mess with me. I continued my explanation unfazed. Your father was a kind man. I wish he had been less trusting of others. He knew his nature might get him into trouble someday. That's why he didn't register our marriage officially. To ensure I wouldn't be burdened if something happened. We were supposed to share these responsibilities as a married couple. What a load of nonsense. Do you expect me to believe that? Why do I have to clean up this mess? You handle it. No matter what I said, my stepson wouldn't accept it. Reluctantly, I showed him a letter from my husband. Upon reading the letter, my stepson started shaking violently. Damn it. Fix this. He kept repeating the same words, acting like a child throwing a tantrum. And I had no inclination to reach out to him. If it hadn't been for that day at the funeral, even knowing this truth might have made me want to support him. That's the situation, so please go home. There's nothing more to say to a stranger. Thank you for your efforts. I returned the words my stepson had hurled at me during the funeral. I won't accept this. Didn't you hear? You and I are strangers. If you don't stop, I'll report you to the police for harassment and extortion. It seemed my seriousness finally got through to him, and he grumbled as he left. The exhaustion felt like it was years in the making. But my spirit was surprisingly clear. Thanks to my husband's love, I had managed to fend off the devil. My husband, knowing something might happen to him, had made a gift of his assets to me in my own account, ensuring I had a considerable fortune. This ordeal made me feel the love my husband had for me. It taught me that a marriage certificate was just a piece of paper. What truly matters between people is the time and memories shared. The time I spent with my husband is my most precious treasure. Thank you. My heart finally found peace. Meanwhile, my stepson, having inherited all of my husband's property, also took on the massive debt and ended up having to sell the house and everything else, leading to a life of penury. This was probably because he never made any effort and didn't engage with people properly. Later, he apparently went begging to my husband's relatives for money. But of course, they wanted nothing to do with him. Originally, my stepson had relied on our family's wealth and dropped out of college, never seriously looking for a job and only working odd jobs occasionally. Now, it seems he's living day to day. Well, it's no longer my concern. I vowed to live the rest of my life cherishing the memories with my husband, who had cherished me, not splurging but living meaningfully. Stop dreaming. It's useless for someone incompetent like you. You're bound to fail anyway. My mother mocked her dreams. From a young age, my mother's cold words always froze me in place. Don't waste your father's money. Give it to me instead. She seemed to never be satisfied unless she took everything from me. Despite my efforts to be liked by my mother, I couldn't take it anymore. I vowed to make her regret the 28 years of continuous insults. I am Casey, 28 years old. It might be unusual at my age, but my father passed away last year. Now, it's just my mother and me. I have a job and dreams, and my mother, who is still with me, is healthy. To outsiders, it might seem like I'm living a happy life. But I have had a serious concern since childhood. Casey, show your face when you get home. How many times do I have to tell you? This is why. When I return home tired from work, I am first greeted by my mother's grumpy voice. I'm home. I thought you were asleep, so I washed my hands first. Always making excuses. You're not doing this at work, are you? You're so unattractive. That's why you're still unmarried and have to keep working. I like my job, and I'm not interested in getting married. That's the problem. You're always so defiant. Why can't you just express your feelings more openly? I can't believe I raised someone who acts so twisted. This day wasn't particularly bad for my mother. This is her normal behavior. Ever since I can remember, she has always denied me, telling me I'm unattractive and incapable. I've given up on expressing my feelings or emotions to my mother. But are you even listening? Do you have any idea how much I've done for you? You have no idea the pain I've been through, losing your father so early, and struggling while you're always distracted at work. I won't tolerate such selfish behavior. It's nice for you to be distracted by work, or you don't understand your mother's suffering, she would say, making it impossible not to engage with her. Even when I once mentioned wanting to live alone, I had a terrible experience. At that time, my father was still alive, but when I tried to view an apartment close to my workplace, my mother blocked my way, cried, and made a scene. Since then, I've been afraid to bring up living alone, and now with my father gone, my dependency on my mother has worsened. I thought, well, I should just ignore her sarcasm and take care of her as a child's duty. I convince myself while catching my tired mind after work dealing with my mother's nagging and sarcasm. But her attitude escalates day by day. Hey, Casey. You've been coming home late recently. Are you incompetent? So you have to stay overtime? Surely you're not wasting money hanging out every day. Despite my busy days at work, I can't escape from my mother's persistent nagging. She beckons me to the living room upon my return, appraising me from head to toe. No. I don't have time to play. I've just been busy. Lies. Someone as incapable as you wouldn't be assigned so much work. I know. Oh no. Casey, you're not hooked on some guy, are you? Stop it. Someone as unattractive as you is just being played with. That's not true. Stop it. From as far back as I can remember, my mother has repeatedly told me I am incompetent and unattractive, and at this moment, she naturally directed these words at me. To her, it's not an insult, but advice for my own good. Up until a year ago, my father protected me, but now it's just my mother and me. I have to take her verbal abuse 100%. Well, are you aware? Casey, since no one chooses you, just keep working quietly and continue living with me. I won't even ask for grandchildren. Grandchildren. My mother laughs as if she's pleased. Her hobby has always been belittling me. I used to think it was okay as long as my mother was in a good mood. But now that it's just the two of us, I feel gloomy thinking this will continue forever. And, by the way, we're almost out of money for this month's household expenses. Casey, you don't have hobbies or a boyfriend, so you must have spare salary, right? Put more money into the house. What? I can't give any more. What? Why not? My mother looks shocked as if she heard something unreasonable. But I'm the one who should be shocked. I already give her a considerable amount each month. To ask for more is like telling me to eliminate my own spending money and dip into my savings. Yet, she doesn't seem to care that I refused, standing up to scold me. Casey. Who do you think raised you to be able to work normally? You're so ungrateful. Making your mother struggle while you indulge yourself is unthinkable. I'm not indulging. I've been putting money into the house properly. saving by sacrificing clothes, makeup, and even going out. There's no room for savings. I barely have any spending money. I'm hesitant to go on a trip to Hawaii because of it. Then you should work, you're still young. My mother is only 56. She tearfully claims to have no money. Yet she has remained a housewife unchanged since before my father's death. The house mortgage is paid off, and with a part-time job combined. With the money I provide, we could live decently. Plus, hesitating about going on a trip seems ridiculous. I'm living at a level where I'm cutting back on life. My dissatisfaction must have shown on my face. Or maybe my suggestion to work annoyed her, as she slammed her fists on the table. What's with that attitude? And how dare you speak to a parent like that? How can you say such arrogant and cold things? You must have been born with a bad character. Not even thinking about making life easier for your only flesh and blood. That's why I'm already supporting you to my limit. Please understand. Ha! To your limit. Yet you recently got a new suit, didn't you? What limit? You could cut back more if you really wanted to. My mother's shrill voice and the way our conversation fails to connect pushed me to my limit. I can't do this anymore. Thinking of me as some kind of ATM. My mother needs a firm assertion from me. I swallow nervously. My hands trembling under the table as I muster the courage to look her straight in the eye. Listen, I haven't told you, but I want to start a business. There's work I want to do. That's why I need to save properly. I can't give any more of my salary or bonuses. What? A business. Facing a trembling me, my mother stood and started laughing loudly. What are you talking about? Impossible, impossible. Absolutely impossible. You've always failed in crucial moments since you were young, and you're just unlucky. Stop dreaming such foolish dreams. That's horrible. Dad believed in me. Tears welled up in my eyes from my mother's harsh reaction, but for my mother, it was business as usual. Clapping her hands nonchalantly, she said, "Oh, your father. By the way, Casey, you have some money left from your father, right? Give that to me." What that money is? My father, unlike my mother, supported everything I wanted to do. He believed in my dreams of starting a business, and before he passed, he left me a significant amount of money. He set up a bank account for me and handed me the passbook and cash card just before he passed away, and of course, my mother knew about this account. Feeling she couldn't squeeze any more money out of me, she now demanded that account. That money was carefully saved by Dad for me. I want to use it for my dreams. What? My fearful response made my mother's face contort as she screamed. That's impossible. Why can't you just hand it over willingly? After all, that money should rightfully belong entirely to a spouse, to your mother. You're just stealing it from her. Stealing. Dad gave that to me. Be quiet. You say you're starting a business, but you're just fooling around, aren't you? You even had to buy a new suit because you've gotten fat. Eating out and enjoying yourself alone, aren't you? I know everything. Overwhelmed by such terrible suspicions, I was left speechless. My mother heaved a heavy sigh and sat down, cradling her head as if tormented by a selfish daughter. I've been lenient, but just because the passbook and debit card are with you, it doesn't change that it's my money. You're eating and drinking well with my money, aren't you? Is food tastier when it's bought with someone else's money? You ungrateful child. Give back every penny now. Why does Mom always say such awful things? As I burst into tears from my mother's harsh words, she clicked her tongue in disgust. There it is. Casey's fake crying. I'm really sick of it. You forget the kindness I've shown in raising you, not contributing money to the house. Not returning my money. You're a terrible daughter. I'm done, this is too much trouble. Saying this, my mother stood up forcefully again. As I looked up through tear-filled eyes, her gaze was cold, glaring down at me. It's just like you, an ungrateful child, to mess things up. This business or whatever you're planning will definitely fail. I've been watching you since you were born and I can say for sure it won't succeed. There's nothing more wasteful than spending money on a hopeless dream. After her tirade, my mother stormed off to her bedroom and slammed the door shut. I went to my room, but the tears wouldn't stop. I was used to her verbal abuse. And she'd probably forget all about this by morning and act as if nothing had happened. I needed to stop letting her affect me so much. I tried to convince myself, but the hurtful words lingered, and I went to sleep feeling depressed. As expected, my mother acted as if nothing had happened the next day. She nagged as usual when I came home from work. I thought, it's always been like this with Mom. If I can just endure the nagging. It seems she won't ask for more money, and I can somehow live peacefully. Yes, even before my father passed away, my mother would blow up at me. And then act as if nothing had happened the next day. As a child, every time she yelled, I cried and apologized profusely, but at my age, I knew better than to cry and apologize. I had to accept that this was the nature of my relationship with my mother and push forward with my dreams. At that moment, I was forcing myself to accept the situation, avoiding confronting the reality of my relationship with my mother, unaware of how deep my mother's obsession ran. After a while, since I opened up to her about my dreams, there were oddly good days where she was in a good mood. She would still lecture me after I came home, but it ended quickly. Apparently, she had been busy spreading out new clothes and makeup she bought during the day in her bedroom. She would hum songs and spend a long time in the bath doing skincare. And I was genuinely thankful for her good moods. I thought, I'm worried she might be spending too much. But it's a huge relief for my mental health. Hopefully, this improvement in our relationship continues. I was so pleased with my mother's mood at the time that I was willing to forgive all the terrible things she had done in the past. Just when I started to have more hope for my mother, I was about to learn about her terrifying nature and my own naivety. I'm home. That day, after finishing overtime, I called out to my mother, who was supposed to be waiting for me in the living room. But there was no usual scolding or even a response. The living room light was on, so it was strange. I called out again, Mom, but no answer. The living room, kitchen, and even my mother's bedroom were empty. I thought, is she out? That's unusual. Lately, my mother had often been out shopping during the day. But she was always there to wait for me at night. I thought, well, she's an adult, maybe she's out late. I, who had never been without my mother's watchful eye, was confused by the feeling of a normal family. I decided it was wrong to wander around the house looking for her as an adult. So I went to my room to put away my things. What is this? I exclaimed when I saw my room ransacked. The closet was opened, and every drawer was turned upside down. I thought, a thief. No way. Could this be related to Mom not being here? Panicked, I grabbed my smartphone to call the police, but decided to check on my mother's safety first. My hands trembled as I held the phone, and after several rings, she didn't answer. I thought, what should I do? I need to call the police. Just as I was about to hang up, my mother finally answered with an annoyed, "Hello? Mom. Where are you? Are you okay?" "Huh? Casey, what are you talking about?" "Because you're not here, and my room's been trashed." As my heart raced, I hurriedly explained, and my mother laughed mockingly over the phone. "You get scared because you can't do anything by yourself when I'm not home." Hilarious. It's not the time to laugh. Actually, Mom is on a trip to Hawaii right now. I won't be back for a week, so take care. I felt a wave of relief knowing my mother was safe, but I was puzzled about my room. "Mom, it's fine that you went on a trip to Hawaii, but why is my room such a mess?" "Oh, that. I was looking for something before I left for the trip." "Looking for something?" I had a bad feeling. Given the state of my room, it seemed my mother was desperately searching for something. "What were you looking for?" Hesitantly, I asked, and my mother sighed. "What do you mean, what?" "The bank book and cash card for the account that has the money Dad gave me." Hearing what my mother was looking for, I felt the blood drain from my face. I rushed to check the drawer where I kept my valuables, and the bank book and cash card my father had given me were gone. "You didn't take it without permission, did you?" "Oh, relax. Mom is kind, so I only used a little bit." "A little bit? How much did you spend?" $5,000. "Well, when the date changes, I'll withdraw another $5,000. It's my money after all, and it's so annoying that there's a withdrawal limit. Hawaii has so many rare things, and I want to buy lots of souvenirs." "Well, it's fine, isn't it? $10,000 is nothing compared to all the love you've taken from me over the years." At my mother's words, I slumped to the ground. $10,000. And she doesn't understand how much that $10,000 means to me. With a blank mind, I continued the phone call with my mother. "How did you withdraw it? You were using the bank account Dad set up, right?" I already knew the PIN. So once I got the bank book and cash card, it was easy. Before he passed away, my father must have shared the savings and the PIN with my mother, believing she would never touch the money meant for his child. The trade by my mother, who even violated that trust. I angrily confronted her. That money was saved by Dad to support my dream of starting a business. Holding the trembling smartphone in my hands, I was the exact opposite of my mother, who seemed utterly indifferent and exhaled deeply. "A business? Oh yes, you mentioned something like that. Don't worry, Casey, you can't handle something that big. You'd definitely fail. That's why Mom nipped it in the bud. Be grateful." "What?" Just as I was about to yell into the phone again, I heard a man's voice calling for my mother in the distance. "Got it. I'm coming now." Suddenly, her tone turned sweet, and she responded to the man. "Mom, are you on a trip with a man?" "So what?" "I'll tell you, unlike you, I am attractive. I have a proper relationship. Because he properly asked me out. I wonder if you will be jealous if I tell you this." Ha ha ha. Laughing merrily, my mother then hung up the phone. I was left alone, staring blankly at my ransacked room. I couldn't believe my mother had withdrawn the money my father left me and went on a trip to Hawaii with a boyfriend she'd met within a year of becoming single. As monstrous as she was, something snapped inside me as I reflected on my mother's actions. Why had I ever tried to be liked by such a person? Why hadn't I seen through her earlier? But regretting won't bring a better future. It's over expecting anything from my mother. She has pushed me to the edge for so long, and I will make sure she regrets it. Filled with a new resolve, I stood up when the home intercom rang. I thought, who could it be at this time? Suspicious, I cautiously responded to the visitor, unaware that I was about to discover a shocking truth about my mother. I'm back. Ah, it was so much fun. A week after her trip to Hawaii, my mother returned home as if nothing had happened, in high spirits. Moreover, she was dressed in a flashy floral dress, a wide-brimmed hat, and sunglasses, looking like she had just come back from some tropical paradise. Look at this. This is a muumuu dress, a traditional Hawaiian craft. It's flashy and suits me so well. It's by a famous designer. I bought a lot. Maybe I should learn hula dancing. And a hula girl doll will be delivered later. The kind I can put on the dashboard. Now I can always remember Hawaii. It was truly a wonderful trip. My mother chattered away, placing more and more luggage around. Clearly elated from the trip with her new boyfriend. Out tumbled brightly patterned dresses from her baggage, which made me want to ask when she would ever wear them. As I silently searched on my smartphone, I found that a famous artist's dresses could cost thousands of dollars. That, you bought all that with the money Dad left for me. You don't even wear dresses usually. And what's with the hula girl doll for the dashboard? Getting carried away buying such useless things. It's truly pathetic. I addressed my mother calmly. She turned to me with a surprised huh? What is it, Casey? Who is that person with you? My mother's surprise turned to shock as she looked at the woman in a suit sitting next to me. I smiled and introduced the woman to my mother. This is Brooke. She's here today because we have an important discussion with Mom. And she agreed to join us. Nice to meet you. I'm Brooke. Instead of returning the greeting, my mother recoiled in surprise. Oh no. What is this, suddenly? Did you mess up at work? And now your boss is here to scold you? You're really hopeless. You've just ruined the best mood I had after my trip. No, that's not it. Everything is different. And how dare you call me hopeless? What? What's with that cheeky attitude? Did you say Brooke? She must be useless at your workplace, right? A twisted woman who looks as unappealing as she acts. I should tell your company to fire you so they don't have to deal with more trouble. No, I don't suffer any inconvenience because of Casey. My mother tried to undermine me in front of Brooke with her snide comments. But Brooke's unaffected demeanor only made my mother frown. Ah, you're insane. That's the kind of boss that would let Casey keep working there. Mom, never mind that. Give me back my $10,000. There's no way a trip to Hawaii costs that much, right? Just give back whatever is left. You're so persistent. That was my money, and I've already spent the full $10,000. You spent all $10,000 on a one-week trip to Hawaii. I had decided to stay calm, but I was truly shaken by my mother's statement. I never imagined she had spent it all. What kind of lavish trip had it been? My mother soon began to reveal. Well, I paid for everything for the trip with my boyfriend. We stayed in a luxury suite multiple nights and enjoyed all kinds of activities. It was just wonderful. What? You paid for everything? Why? Because it was our first anniversary, and we're so in love. Plus, he's a bit strapped for cash right now. I wanted to impress him and make him love me even more. My mother was smiling dreamily, a look I had never seen before. If what she said was true about their first anniversary, that meant she started dating him right after my father died. My mother was far more monstrous and senseless than I had ever imagined. I resolved that there was no saving her and stared at her directly. Mom, I'm going to sue you. I will take this to court to get the money back. What? Her dreamy face transformed into a mask of horror. Don't joke. I just spent my own money. Why should I be sued? Casey, no matter how incompetent you are at work, this is too much. My mother looked at me with disdain, as usual, laughing as if the idea of being sued was preposterous. I nodded to Brooke, who was sitting beside me. It is indeed possible for Casey to sue you. You stole a bank book registered under Casey's name and withdrew the money for yourself. Unfortunately, it's a family matter, so it won't become a criminal case. However, there are no restrictions on filing a civil lawsuit. We will make sure you return it. What, Brooke too? This is a matter between me and Casey. I don't know who you are, boss or whatever, but you're an outsider and should stay out of this. My mother glared at Brooke unpleasantly, but Brooke remained unfazed. Watching this exchange, I decided it was time to clarify Brooke's role. Mom, Brooke isn't my boss. She's a lawyer. Huh? That means that I've hired a lawyer to sue you and get the $10,000 back. As I firmly declared this, my mother began to tremble violently. Wait. Why should I have to pay back my own daughter? Brooke answered. You might want to save that argument for court. Searching your daughter's house and taking her bank book to withdraw money and claiming it's your own? That's laughable. For the first time, Brooke showed a smile. I can't return $10,000. And you're threatening to sue. What should I do? I don't care. You should have thought about this before spending $10,000. And, Mom, you'll owe more than just $10,000. What? You still want to squeeze more money out of me? My mother looked at me with a victim's gaze. I sighed and nodded at Brooke, indicating, please proceed. Mrs. Casey's mom, I am the lawyer contracted by Casey, but I have another role too. What? I don't know anything about that. I am the wife of the man you enjoyed your trip to Hawaii with. With Brooke's revelation, my mother was so shocked she fell from her chair. A loud thud echoed in the quiet living room. She managed to get up, but her complexion worsened, and she trembled even more. Wife. Did you know he was married? No excuses will work. I have evidence of your emails with my husband, knowing he was married. But I didn't know his wife was a lawyer. That's so unfair. Truly unfair, isn't it? A worthless man, supported by his lawyer wife, going around with other women. I won't forgive him. Or you. Brooke had hired a detective for both her husband and my mother. When they went on their trip, she visited my house, enraged by a tip-off that my mother, who seemed to have no money, had suddenly started splurging in Hawaii. Perhaps thinking I was in on it too, and gave her a lump sum. The reality was that I too was a victim of my mother's actions. Brooke decided to take my case when she realized this, seeing me as a fellow victim. I was grateful for her intervention, since I needed to find a lawyer anyway. And thanks to her prompt actions, everything was ready by the time my mother came back. My husband, pretending to have a family emergency, went on a trip to Hawaii. And the funds? From a recently widowed woman. Moreover, that money was originally for her daughter. I can't forgive this. I'll claim from you both, just the money, since that's all I can squeeze out. Stop it. I didn't mean to. Casey. Tell her it's a misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? What kind of nerve does it take to move on with someone's husband right after your father's death? Knowing that, I lost all sympathy for you at the end, Mom. Make sure you pay what you owe to me and Brooke. What are you saying? Never having been seriously contradicted by me before, my mother was speechless. Her usual bravado gone, just opening and closing her mouth. I've always tried to make you like me. From childhood. Each time you said something terrible, I was hurt but hoped that if I tried harder, you'd recognize me. But, Mom, you've always just been selfish. Selfish. I've sacrificed so much to raise you, Casey. To be treated like this by my own child, what have I done to deserve this? Mom, every day you've been spewing spite and venom at your precious daughter. You've taken as much money as you could from me, and right after losing your husband, you took money from my account for a trip with a boyfriend you made so quickly. And that boyfriend was already married. It's unbelievable how low people can go. Just listing the things my mother did made her face turn red with anger. What kind of persecution complex is that? Getting cocky. I won't forgive this. I'm not the one seeking forgiveness here. We were discussing whether I can forgive you. I want $10,000 you took to be returned. I'm prepared to take this to court if necessary. I will fully support Ms. Casey and proceed with my claim for damages. As a lawyer with my own firm, I have many trustworthy colleagues as well. Shockingly, it seemed my mother had temporarily forgotten that she had meddled with another woman's husband. At the mention of a lawsuit and claims for damages, her face turned pale, and she started to tremble again. Wait, please, Brooke. I'm truly sorry. I didn't mean to. And about Casey. She isn't the kind of terrible daughter who would sue her own mother, right? She's always been kind and forgiving, capable of forgiving anything. Isn't that wrong? I thought you said I was unattractive and cold. And I didn't mean to is what you say to a wife after knowing her husband was married? That's the worst. I don't want to think of you as my mother. So I can go through with this without any remorse. Realizing she couldn't change my mind, my mother finally began to bow repeatedly, her complexion worsening. Please. I have no money. I've been saving from the money Casey brings home to somehow gather enough for the damages. So, please wait to take back $10,000. Please. What are you saying? At this point, you're still relying on my money. And you plan to prepare money for your mess with the money I bring home. Don't joke. But, I don't have anyone else to turn to. Isn't that pitiful? Right? I've been looked down upon enough. Unfortunately, I'm leaving this house. So there won't be any more living expenses from me. Show some initiative and earn your own money. I had already cleared out my room and had nearly emptied it. There was a hesitation to leave the house filled with memories of my father, and to abandon my mother, but I decided I no longer saw her as a kin. Thus, my mind was clear, free from any regrets. The chains were broken. My late father would be happy to see me living freely. How could you say that? How am I supposed to live now without you? I don't know. I've been telling you to work. If you manage to return $10,000 safely, I'll sever ties with you. I'll send a severance declaration. It has no legal effect, but it'll give me peace of mind. Having explained this, my mother just gaped. How cruel. If I'm deserted by my husband and disowned by my only daughter, what should I do? You reap what you sow. I thought you had long been prepared to be abandoned by me. Given the cold things you've said. No. I always meant well. Everything I did was for you. Yeah, you always say that, but never reflect. Keep justifying yourself all you want. It's no longer my concern. I stood up, went to my room, and brought out my suitcase. Feel free to dispose of the remaining furniture. Goodbye. As I moved to leave with Brooke, my mother began to cry and kowtow desperately. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were so hurt. I'll return the money. I'll break up with my boyfriend and never meet him again. Don't leave me alone. I'll be so lonely. Maybe another fun trip to Hawaii will distract you? But no trips until after you've returned the $10,000. And paid the damages, all right? Goodbye. Leaving my crying mother behind, I walked away with Brooke. Her cries of "I'm sorry" chased after us, but they didn't tug at my heart. Afterward, my mother started working to return the money and to pay damages to Brooke. I arranged for her to repay $10,000 over a year. And Brooke's damages were settled in one lump sum by borrowing. Which meant my mother, working part-time, was dedicating most of her salary to repayments. During her first part-time job, my mother struggles with many unfamiliar tasks. And her only pleasure, her salary, disappears into repayments the very day it's deposited. She's reportedly building up a lot of frustration. However, she must continue payments, or a writ of execution will be enforced based on a public document. Therefore, she absolutely cannot stop repaying. I'm truly grateful that Brooke, a real lawyer, stormed into our home. If I had been left to negotiate the repayment alone, things might have turned out differently. Starting part-time work for the first time in her 50s, she struggled and was disliked by her coworkers and other part-time employees. The incompetence she used to accuse me of was now coming back to haunt her. Even if she's a parent, it's no excuse for throwing such harsh words at a child. My mother lost her boyfriend, felt loneliness at work, and became mentally unstable. She spends her days crying over photos of my father and me. She continues to live in the house filled with memories of me and my father, which isn't good for her mental health, but she has nowhere else to go. So she can just let her loneliness swell. Alone, she finally might have started to reflect on the irreversible damage she did to her irreplaceable family. I ignore all her daily calls, emails, and occasional letters begging for forgiveness. I have no intention of forgiving her. Re-establishing contact would only let her revert to her old ways of looking down on me. Once $10,000 is repaid, I'll send the severance declaration as promised. Change my phone number and address, separate our family registries, and impose restrictions on viewing my registry and residence records to completely cut ties. Only then can I truly start living my own life. My dream of starting a business is taking shape. And I'm on the verge of quitting my current job. Another reason my business plan is progressing is that Brooke, at a very low cost, continues to provide legal counsel and advice. Brooke has proven to be an incredibly adept lawyer, taking on the contracts and legal procedures that I struggled with. She has become an indispensable business partner. The situation I found myself in when my mother took $10,000 and I was left in despair could have been much different without her. It's regrettable that I couldn't show my father, who was the only one who supported my dreams, how far I've come. The success of my newly started business plan and meeting a dependable partner like Brooke might somehow be thanks to my father's support, I wonder. As I pursue the career I've always dreamed of, I place my hands together in front of my father's photo each day to express my gratitude.
When my husband and I went to celebrate our eldest son's new house, we encountered an unbelievable scene. Tess, our daughter-in-law, suddenly yelled at us loudly, "The housewarming gift is $50,000. If you can't pay, then the old hag should leave." My husband and I were so shocked that we could only stand there, frozen. Our son, Kevin, also looked puzzled and could only utter, "What?" It took some time to clear my head, but we decided we couldn't let this go. We decided to bring her down. My name is Megan, a 60-year-old housewife. Currently, I'm living a peaceful life with my husband John. Our only son, Kevin, who lives far away, recently got engaged. And things have been pretty hectic for him. "Mom, sorry I can't show up often because I'm busy. I'll bring her over to our place when I get a day off, so please make some time." "Okay, I got it. I know you're busy, but make sure you eat well and get enough sleep." Our son has been working at a major trading company for 5 years now. He's often exhausted from being entrusted with significant responsibilities, but he's eager and works hard. Though we rarely see him since he started working, we feel relieved knowing he often contacts us. And his girlfriend he met during this busy time. I've never met her, but I feel so grateful to her. She is Tess, an office worker 5 years younger than him. Tess really wants to get married soon. She wants to marry me as soon as possible. So, I'll be coming by next week to introduce her. Suddenly, my son wanted to come over to introduce her. I wasn't prepared at all, so I was completely flustered. What should we do? Kevin wants to bring Tess over for a greeting next week. My heart is pounding. I've never done anything like this before. What kind of hospitality should we provide? What are you talking about? Just be normal, as always. I'll buy some delicious cakes from the shop near the station. Megan, just tidy up the house and prepare some coffee. That's all you need to think about. Seeing me flustered, my husband laughed and said that, indeed, there's no need to rush for a mere greeting. Perhaps, Tess might be more nervous than I am. So, I felt that staying calm and composed would be the best for her. Still, it was an uneasy week. What kind of person had our son chosen to marry? I couldn't help but worry. I wanted to avoid any mother-in-law issues and hoped to treat Tess like my own daughter, shopping together, cooking together. Finally, the day arrived, but we were utterly astonished the moment we saw Tess. "Nice to meet you. Sorry for intruding. This is Kevin's home, huh?" I was shocked. It's older than I thought. And, you're not at all what I imagined for a mother. I thought you'd be more fashionable. What a disappointment. What? Tess, without any greeting, just blurted out her thoughts. She looked me up and down and snorted. I had thought that the gentle-natured son's partner would be petite and cute. However, she was a tall woman with a severe look. I thought, I might not be able to handle this. I don't think I can get along with her. That's what I realized in my heart. And Tess, ignoring us, made herself at home. And said arrogant things. This room layout is nonsense. Or, even if we have children, it's better not to let them play here. My son just laughed and didn't stop Tess's remarks. Mom, Dad, sorry. Tess is young and still doesn't know how to read between the lines. She'll understand gradually, so please be patient with her. He said that casually, but it looked more like he was completely under her control rather than being dominated. And I hoped he would either call off or at least postpone the marriage to rethink his future. A brief greeting. After about an hour, the two left, but for us, it felt like the storm had passed. What was that? I got nervous for nothing. And to think we were ridiculed, I was at a loss for words. Yeah, indeed. It was only an hour, but it was exhausting. Well, this is the reality. If Kevin chose Tess, we have to accept it. We decided not to talk about Tess anymore since it was a time we didn't want to remember. However, their relationship seemed to continue smoothly. And they even discussed a date to register their marriage. Concerned for our busy son, they decided to postpone the wedding for a while, but to my dismay, they decided to get married. I thought, what will happen now? That's what we, as parents, worried about our son, but still, it was the life he chose. So we decided to celebrate wholeheartedly. I heard from my son that the apartment they were living in was too cramped for two. Maybe we should build a house. We can each have our own rooms. And maintain our privacy. My son excitedly talked about his ideal home. And my husband finally decided to listen seriously. I see. Okay. Unlike me, my husband isn't much of a talker but nodded throughout our son's story. Afterward, the couple successfully registered their marriage and became husband and wife. We met Tess's parents, but they were just like their daughter, lacking common sense. Please remember that you have taken my daughter as your son's wife, and other condescending remarks kept coming non-stop. Since they live far away and have little contact, we just endured what was said to us. However, if we lived nearby and had frequent encounters, I'm sure it would have led to arguments. That's how much their behavior lacked common sense. Tess also mentioned, even though I've married Kevin and become a part of this family, I have no intention of taking care of you or your husband in the future. You both should live your own lives. I couldn't muster the energy to discuss anything else. So I just responded, yes, that's fine. We don't plan to rely on you. The situation was so absurd, whether it was anger or dismay I felt, it was all mixed together. Yet, despite my own feelings, we've been enduring a lot. Thinking only of our son's happiness. 6 months later, we finally received word that our new home was completed. Surprisingly, it wasn't our son who contacted us, but Tess. Hello, it's been a while, this is Tess. You might have heard, but the new house is finished, and we plan to move in next week. I was wondering if you'd like to come over for a visit? Thank you. Sorry that you had to reach out. Well then, I'll take you up on that offer and visit. Tess seemed unusually cheerful, which made me suspicious of her intentions. Given everything that's happened, it's not unreasonable to think there might be an ulterior motive. But, true to my suspicions, when we visited the new house, which we had decided to celebrate more generously than planned, Tess greeted us with shocking statements right away. Mother, thanks for coming all this way. Welcome to our $3 million mansion. And about the housewarming gift, I'd like to have it in advance. You didn't forget to bring it, did you? We hadn't even seen inside the house yet, hadn't spoken a word. And hadn't even seen my son, the owner of the house. Yet she was already demanding a gift. Shocked, I managed to say, yes. Of course, we've brought something, but there's a certain order to these things. Let's see and talk with my son first. My husband was beside me, equally astonished by her boldness. But it was clear Tess was targeting me, glaring at me like a devil. Then she burst out. What's with this person? Coming into someone's house to preach? That's unbelievable. I shouldn't have invited you. Eventually, my son appeared, having been working in the yard. But Tess was completely oblivious to everything around her. She turned to us, glaring, and shouted. The housewarming gift should be $50,000. If you can't pay, then the old hag should leave. I thought, what is with this girl? This is too much. Both my husband and I were so shocked we could only stand there. Even my son seemed taken aback, managing only a puzzled huh? Despite saying what she wanted, Tess seemed relieved, but for us, the situation was intolerable. It took some time to gather my thoughts. I decided that if this is how it's going to be, I had to take drastic measures. If my son continued to side with Tess, then he was complicit. However, looking at my husband, I could tell he was even more furious than I was. He rarely gets angry, but this was too much. He sternly said to our son, Kevin, you can't possibly be okay with this, can you? Your own mother is being called an old hag right in front of you, and being asked for a huge sum as a housewarming gift. My son hesitated for a moment, then looked down and let out a sinister chuckle. Why should I be lectured about this? Dad, don't you think what you're doing is patronizing? Acting all high and mighty. Seeing our son's defiant attitude was shocking. It was his true nature showing through. And it was utterly disappointing. Disgusted by everything, I lost all interest. Kevin, enough is enough. This mansion, with its large yard and even a pool. I began to say, but my husband was fed up and interrupted, all right, that's enough. Let's tear this place down. Kevin, that's fine, right? You have no right to complain. I nodded in agreement. There was no point in getting angry on their behalf anymore. Yes, let's do that. It's a waste of time to deal with these people. You can cut ties with us, live your life however you want. With that, we left our son's house immediately. My husband called the contractors right away. An hour after leaving, I checked my phone to find incessant calls from my son. All of which we ignored. There was no intention to forgive or reconcile. Our patience had snapped. Despite multiple calls, when he realized we weren't answering, my son sent apologetic emails, which we also ignored. We took the train back to our own home, and shortly after, Tess showed up, distraught. My son wasn't with her, and all she could say was that he had been crying at home. What's going on? I haven't heard anything about this. The fact that your father built that house, covering almost the entire cost of what would normally be a $3 million property. Unbeknownst to Tess, my husband, who is an architect, had been the one building their house. He had meticulously designed their mansion with a large garden, balcony, and swimming pool, working almost sleeplessly for the past 6 months. All to make his son and daughter-in-law happy. Yet, Tess demanded a hefty housewarming gift, and my son, despite knowing the truth, said nothing. I have no intention of ever dealing with you two, who don't understand the meaning of gratitude. Of course, I never intended to get involved, but let's cut ties then. That's right. Kevin, he is terrible, but Tess, you are the worst for us. I thought you were rude from the beginning, but honestly, I never imagined you could be this awful. If you want to live in that house, you'll have to pay the full amount. No more covering for you. As we spoke harshly, Tess trembled, on the verge of tears. But I didn't know anything about this. How could you suddenly expect me to manage a loan of $3 million? And Kevin has just been fired from his previous job. What? It seems that something was off with Kevin, he looked too busy. But in reality, he had been embezzling company funds and was now juggling for part-time jobs to pay it back. Meanwhile, Tess was doing nothing but lounging around at home. She had always dreamed of being a housewife. And that's why she wasn't working. I was so appalled by all of this, I was at a loss for words. Soon after, Kevin came to us, his eyes red from crying, and as soon as he entered the house, he broke down saying, "Mom, Dad, I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. I bought things Tess wanted, but her demands kept growing, and my salary wasn't enough to fulfill her desires. I ended up taking money from the company. What? How could you say like that? It sounds like you're blaming me for doing something wrong. Stop blaming me. You were the one who took the company's money. Eventually, they had a huge argument right in front of us. That's why we thought it was best to stay away from this woman. It was clear she was only after the money and wouldn't even properly do any housework. If they married. Despite our hopes for Kevin to see the truth, things had come to this. Well, they had already registered their marriage, and there was nothing we could do about that, but Kevin was just as guilty for not addressing his wife's unreasonable behavior. Normally, a family supports each other in tough times. And we might have considered financial help, but we just couldn't feel like doing so. Well, you've made your bed, now you have to lie in it. You need to reevaluate your finances and find a place to live that matches your means. They were crying as they listened to my words. I thought Mom would help me. I thought Dad would give me the money. We were utterly dismayed by our son's reliance on us until the very end. John was furious. Enough with the foolishness. You haven't made any effort on your own. You chose your wife yourself. Take responsibility and solve your own problems. Kevin had never really done anything on his own. Indeed, he had always been dependent on others. His teachers had decided his educational path since he was good at studying, and he just happened to get hired at the places he applied to. He was lucky to work at a major company. But because he couldn't make decisions himself, someone like Tess could easily manipulate him. Well, that was his fate. We had helped him until now, but now that he was married and had his own family, he had to deal with his own issues. From now on, you two need to work together to overcome your problems. We can't help you anymore, and we have no intention of seeing you again. Please, be happy. We said clearly to the two of them as they were crying. Realizing that talking was useless, they left with their shoulders slumped. We imagined their life would be hellish. And indeed, it turned out to be quite tragic. Firstly, it emerged that Tess had accrued a substantial amount of debt. Not only in her name but also in Kevin's. This led to a massive argument between them. How are we supposed to live now? I haven't even paid back the company's money. But it couldn't be helped. There was a bag I wanted. If you're a man, it's normal to earn enough to buy your wife the things she wants. Despite being newlyweds, they moved into a run-down apartment. And repeatedly had arguments loud enough for their neighbors to hear. They wanted to divorce but couldn't, and Tess, fearful of debt collectors, started working nights. Despite the old saying that where money leads, affection follows. They were too entangled to part ways and were living a hard-working life. It's sad, but perhaps this is just their fate. Kevin seems to be working hard every day. I heard from a neighbor that he was seen working at a construction site late at night. Tess didn't suit the nightlife, so now she's working as a cashier at a grocery store. Really? Well, despite everything, seeing how they haven't divorced and are working hard, they might be well suited for each other after all. John and I occasionally discuss our estranged son and his wife. As for us, after much discussion, we decided to move into the mansion that was meant for Kevin. There was talk of selling it or demolishing it. But it seemed like a waste. It had a large garden and a swimming pool. And with top-notch security, Kevin and Tess couldn't just walk in. Although it's built for a family with children, it feels like a good environment for our retirement. So, here we are, living peacefully in the mansion. Cut off from our son, but hoping to continue enjoying our lives quietly with John.
I am Maggie. I am 24 years old and an office worker, about to get married. I live at my parents' home, but I would prefer to leave even before I get married. The reason is that I don't get along well with my family. My family revolves around my younger sister, Abby, who is 2 years younger than me. My existence to them is almost like air, no, maybe slightly different. Mainly, for the convenience of my mother and sister, I become either invisible or a wallet. Maggie, I hate to ask, but could you prepare $300 for me? My mother asks for money very casually, without showing any sign of feeling bad about it. I contribute $1,000 to the household every month though. My father is still actively employed as a manager, and he earns quite well. My mother also works part-time 3 days a week. With my $1,000 added, we should be able to live reasonably well, though not luxuriously. However, about halfway through the month, I usually hear, "We're a little short. Could you add some more?" I'd like to know what they spend the money on, but as a child, I was never favored by my mother, and she doesn't really answer my questions. I've tried asking several times, but the conversation always ends with, "When I say we're a little short, that's all." You've never lived on your own, have you? Life is tough, full of unexpected things, and that's the end of that. It's unfair to say I've never lived alone. Ever since entering university, I've been saying I want to be independent. Each time, my mother has refused. Why rent an apartment when you have a home? It's not like the university is that far. Or it's dangerous for a young woman to live alone. It's safer and cheaper to stay at home. If you live on your own, you can't save much of your salary, and so on. Despite all this, I am often relied upon for money. They're probably just pretending to be concerned, but actually see me as a cash cow. I should just leave my parents' house, but how should I put it? When I give money, my mother beams at me. If I meet her additional demands, she praises me, saying, "As expected, you're reliable, Maggie." It feels good to be praised. And even though I know I'm being treated as a cash cow, I can't leave my family home. Maybe I'm quite sick. The only person who really seems to worry about me is my paternal grandmother. I've heard that she has adored me since I was born. My father once said, "When your grandma heard you were born, she waited in the hospital without sleeping. She was the first to hold you and was so happy, saying what a good child." Looking back, maybe that wasn't so good. My mother doesn't say anything, but she's not very close to my grandmother. So, I can't help but suspect there's something about the circumstances of my birth that bothers her. Abby, on the other hand, is absolutely doted on. Cute clothes, accessories, almost anything she wants. My mother used to buy them all when she was in elementary school. When I wanted a dress like one piece, my mother immediately said no. Why can't I? I want to wear it because it's cute. Where would you wear such flashy, frilly clothes? Do you think you're a princess or something? If you wore this to school, you'd be the laughingstock. There's a way to say no, isn't there? I really thought so. My mother always complains about what I want, not just ignoring my wishes. By the way, the dress like one piece was bought for Abby in a different size. How cute. Mom, I want to wear this outfit. Looks nice. It'll definitely suit you, Abby. Right after I was denied, it was decided in front of me. It's one of my oldest memories of my mother's differential treatment. But there are probably more. Forgetting them is the only saving grace. My father never says anything about my mother's attitude. Even when I cried to him, he'd irresponsibly say, "Your grandmother will dote on you, right?" According to my father, it's fair because my grandmother dotes on me and my mother on my sister. Moreover, my father also favors my sister. Abby has learned the wrong way from my mother's attitude. She obviously looks down on me. "Maggie, lend me some money." My mother doesn't say lend, but my sister is different. It's obvious she has no intention of returning it, yet she casually says, "Lend it to me." I am a full-time employee, but Abby only works part-time. 2 days a week for 3 hours each. It's clear that our incomes are different. Normally, she might think to work harder to earn more herself. But my sister takes shortcuts, trying to easily get what she wants from me. What will you use it for? Does it matter? It does matter. I can't just carelessly lend you important money without knowing what it's for. You've never paid me back even once. If I tell you what it's for, will you lend it to me? Then I'll tell you. I'm going to buy a new designer bag. The way she says I'll tell you, as if she's doing me a favor, is all too familiar and disheartening. Regardless of whether I know the reason or not, I have no choice. If I refuse, Abby will say, "Okay, fine. I'll ask Mom," and that's what happens. Then my mother generously opens her wallet, and the burden is pushed onto me with a request to add a bit more. If I refuse further, Abby will inevitably cry to my mother that Maggie won't lend me any. And I end up being lectured at length. So, really, there's no need to ask why she needs the money. It's just my small way of resisting being treated as a mere source of money. Brian, my fiancé, is aware of this dysfunctional relationship. When we met and started dating, he said he was thinking about marriage. I wanted to hide my relationship with my mother and sister from him. But thinking about the damage it could cause if he found out later, I reluctantly opened up to him. I told him, "Brian, there's something I want you to know about not being cherished by my mother, how unbelievably favored my sister is, and the financial burden that falls on me." At first, Brian was confused and said, "Really? Can parents make such a difference?" He seemed not to believe me. However, when he visited my family home for a marriage introduction, my mother blatantly revealed her true feelings, saying, "Wow, what a nice person. Isn't Abby good enough? Why does it have to be Maggie?" "Well, Maggie's good at earning, that's her merit. We want her to stay at home." This overt statement made Brian recoil in shock, and he understood the situation. Brian is recognized as handsome and works for a major corporation. I could tell he was desired as a potential husband for Abby. And Abby herself didn't seem entirely displeased, which, despite being my sister, made me feel quite uncomfortable. Fortunately, Brian was not swayed by my mother and sister, and with a wry smile, he firmly stated, "In fact, I have decided. I will make Maggie happy." I remember clearly how my mother muttered under her breath, "You have no eye for women." Abby seemed to lose interest in Brian right away. She could always get new things, whereas I was given her hand-me-downs, which might have played a part in her attitude. Maybe she felt like she didn't need her sister's hand-me-ups? Thanks to this, I didn't have to worry about my fiancé being snatched away by my sister. When I told my grandmother, she cried with joy. Taking Brian's hand, she pleaded, "Please take good care of Maggie. Make her happy for a long time." Brian was moved to tears and gently promised, "Yes, I will take care of Maggie." I was truly happy at that moment. Wedding preparations take time. The ceremony was set for 6 months later. I seriously wanted to move out and live with Brian even before the wedding. But I could see my mother's strong opposition and gave up. The wedding preparations are slowly progressing. My mother is not involved, and my sister doesn't say much either. Those two only show interest in me for financial reasons. And otherwise, they don't care much. They often ask, "You'll continue working after marriage, right?" "Yes, I plan to work full-time until we have children. After that, maybe part-time. I'm not asking about your life plan. Can you continue to send money home? That's what matters. Even after getting married, they expect me to keep contributing financially to the home. I have no such intention, but to avoid trouble, I just nod along non-committally. It's clear I'm only seen as a money courier. Annoyed by my mother's behavior, I focused on saving. I'm not particularly excited about the wedding itself. I'd rather use that money for our new life. Brian and I agree on this. However, given his respectable position in a major company, we can't have a shoddy wedding. We need to have a proper ceremony to uphold his dignity. Go on a honeymoon and invest in our new home, which will require a significant amount of money. But being treated as a cash cow by my mother and sister is a headache. Still, I found a way to alleviate these problems. My grandmother, wanting to celebrate my marriage, prepared a large sum of money for me, as much as $30,000. An enormous amount for a wedding gift. Grandma, is this okay? It's neither good nor bad. I've been saving for this. I wanted to live long enough to see you in your bridal dress. And you found a good husband. Please let me celebrate. My grandmother came to my family home specifically to give me the wedding gift directly. She preferred to hand it over in person rather than just transfer it via the bank. I was very grateful. However, my mother and sister witnessed the entire exchange, which gave me a very bad feeling. Dad, I'm afraid to keep this amount of money in my room. Could I use your safe? There's a sizable safe in my father's study, mainly because his work sometimes requires him to bring home large sums of money. It's rare, but when needed, it's crucial. He agreed to let me use it. The safe is secured with a numeric lock, and I don't know the combination. After my grandmother left, I handed the celebration money to my father to put in the safe. Feeling my mother's piercing gaze, I was undecided whether to deposit it in the bank or to start paying various wedding-related expenses. Wanting to consult Brian, a week passed with the money still in the safe. The day after we decided how to use it, I came home to find my mother and sister smirking at me in the living room. What's going on? Hey, Maggie, look at this. With a malicious smile, my sister flaunted a bag at me. That was a new model from her favorite brand. I remembered it being quite expensive. Did you buy it? Mom bought it for me. Huh, good for you. I was surprised by how monotonously I responded. However, Abby's meaningful smirk didn't stop, nor did my mother's. What was going on? What is it? It's not just this. Look, a necklace, pumps, a new dress, and even cosmetics. Wait, what? I was shocked. Abby's favorite brand is a famous high-end one, with bags typically costing around $10,000, and pumps are never under $1,000. I wondered how much the total cost was. Mom, just because Abby asked you, doesn't mean you should. Do we really have the financial leeway to splurge on brand items like that? There was leeway a week ago. My mother also smirked. Then I remembered. She had been staring intently at the $30,000 I received from Grandma. No way. It felt good, spending $30,000 in one day. Yeah, we used Grandma's $30,000 happily. The $30,000 in the safe meant for the wedding, I used it for Abby. You don't mind, huh? I'm not interested in your wedding. It's more important to make Abby look good so she can attract a good marriage proposal. My mother and Abby started giggling, looking at each other. I was holding my head because I realized they were making a huge mistake. The $30,000 from the safe. That's not my money, it's not even for the wedding. What are you talking about? Did the wedding getting cancelled panic you? No, that's not it. As for the $30,000 from Grandma, I've already made payments here and there today, and the rest I've deposited in the bank. That was the reason I had been out. After discussing with Brian, we made payments for the initial wedding expenses, including a dress for a change of attire to please my grandmother. Of course, I didn't use all of it. The remaining money was definitely going to be deposited. My mother and Abby did misunderstand. Then suddenly, hey, where did the $30,000 in the safe go? My father came running into the living room, his face pale. $30,000? What? What's going on here? That's what I want to know. Why is the $30,000 gone? That was contract money I had to take to the company. My father works in sales for condominiums and for big purchases. Contract money can run into several tens of thousands. Normally, this is transferred to a bank. But occasionally a client prefers to pay in cash to avoid hefty fees. When he receives cash late at night, he can't bring it into the closed office. So he keeps it in the safe at home. After I received the wedding gift from grandmother, my father also closed a deal. The contract money was also $30,000. So my mother mistakenly used the money meant for my father's company deposit. My mother and Abby, realizing their mistake, turned even paler than white. That wasn't Maggie's money? You idiot! What are we going to do now? If it stays this way, it'll be as if I embezzled. What? You must be kidding. If I were just kidding, would I be this panicked? You've really done it now. My father shouted at them, ordering them to return the purchases for a refund or to get cash if they couldn't. Abby cried and resisted, but even my mother couldn't play favorites this time. She forcefully took the luxury items. They tried desperately to recover the $30,000, but time was short. My father needed to take the money to the company by tomorrow. Ultimately, they were only able to get about $10,000 at a pawn shop. My father had to plead with grandmother over the phone. I can help, but there's a condition. You need to deal with your wife and Abby. Deal with them how? Figure it out yourself. Didn't your wife coldly treat Maggie out of spite for me? I know she's always resented me for holding Maggie first when she was born. It's fine if she hates me, but what did Maggie do to deserve this? If you hate the mother-in-law, you hate your own child too. What kind of reasoning is that? Chastised by grandmother, my father seemed to finally see the light. He called my mother and Abby and declared, "I'm divorcing you, and Abby, you need to become independent," and told them to leave the house. They cried and screamed hysterically, but my father was unforgiving. How can I work now, after being a housewife all these years? Dad, why me too? Enough. I've let you two get away with too much. No more coddling. My father firmly stated his position and apologized to me. Thus, my mother and Abby were expelled from the family home and now live together in a cheap, run-down apartment. My mother hasn't found a job, and Abby is doing part-time work. I heard their life is extremely hard. This incident made me resolve to truly separate from my parents. And as a lesson from my mother and sister, I vowed never to play favorites when I have children.
Pinching pennies like that just makes you look poor. When we got married, my husband used to praise me for being frugal and a good wife. But just 2 years later, he changed. "You're too poor for me. I'm going to live with my wealthy lover, so let's get a divorce." I thought, is that so? How wealthy is this lover of yours? He seemed to think he was supporting me, but he was sorely mistaken. This actually made things easier for me. I would gladly get a divorce from him quickly. My name is Anna, and I just turned 30, a full-time homemaker. I met Ben, my husband, who is 2 years my senior, through a mutual friend 3 years ago. He made a strong approach, and we quickly started dating. After a year of dating, we got married. Back then, I was a receptionist at a major department store, and Ben worked for a large corporation. Although we didn't have a wedding ceremony, our marriage was envied by those around us. Upon getting married, I quit my job to become a full-time homemaker. Ben's mother was a homemaker who was good at saving money. And he wanted me to be always at home and manage our household efficiently. He had lived at home until our marriage and had never done housework. However, after marrying me, he did most of the cleaning and laundry because he didn't want my hands to get rough. He treated me like a princess and wanted to cherish me. He would even say, "Anna, please stay beautiful like this forever." I reciprocated his feelings by being diligent with savings and managing our finances well. A year into our marriage, we were blessed with a cute son. Ben took paternity leave and was actively involved in bathing and putting our son to sleep daily, earning him praise as a hands-on dad. To show our son in the future, he bought a diary made of high-quality paper to keep a parenting diary together. At first, he eagerly wrote about our parenting and our relationship. Although he stopped writing in the diary after about 6 months, I continued to keep it meticulously to show it to our son someday. Ben's attitude drastically changed around the time our son turned 1. Not only did he stop contributing to the parenting diary, but also he stopped doing the household chores he used to do voluntarily. Furthermore, he began to find fault with my parenting and housekeeping. "Ugh, your cooking seems so poor. Dress him in better clothes. Our home feels so poor, it's depressing. Where did he go, who praised me for being good at saving money?" Moreover, he started coming home late, and we rarely had dinner together as a family of 3. On holidays, he often went out alone. When asked where he was going, he said, "I have to go out because our home feels poor." Furthermore, he complained about our sons crying at night and kicked us out of the bedroom. Reluctantly, my son and I started sleeping in the living room. Eventually, he even stopped holding our son. One day, after sending him off to work and finishing cleaning and laundry, I was getting ready to take our son to the park. Then the doorbell rang. "Hello. I'm coming." I peered through the intercom and saw an unknown woman standing there. I regretted responding without checking who it was. But since I had already responded, I decided to go out. "Good morning. Do you know who I am?" The woman, decked out in brand-name clothes, spoke rudely. "I shouldn't know anyone like this." As I pondered, she began. "The answer is, I'm Ben's girlfriend." So this is your son. And you must be his wife." I was confused by the sudden encounter. I couldn't just believe what the woman who had appeared out of nowhere said. "I will discuss this with my husband, so please leave now." "Well, then, I'll wait until he comes back. If I leave it to him, it'll drag on." Insisting like this, she wouldn't leave. It was intolerable to keep discussing this at the doorstep. Reluctantly, I let the woman inside. I suppose you will want to break up after hearing my story. But well, you seem to have no money, and you have a baby. You won't let go of Ben, right? Just then, our son started crying. Since my son is crying, could you please leave? I asked her, but she seemed not to care at all and just kept talking. According to her, she was the same age as me and the daughter of some company president. She had fallen in love with Ben at first sight and had approached him herself. They had quickly fallen for each other. And it had been about 3 months since they started dating. It was really unbelievable that she barged in suddenly and kept talking despite the baby crying. I was dumbfounded, thinking, is this really how the daughters of company presidents behave nowadays? Do you know what Ben says about you? The woman wouldn't stop talking. I'm telling you what he said. Before marriage, even though you earned little, you were a beautiful receptionist he could boast about. But now you are a poor-looking old woman with no income, whom he can't introduce to anyone. The meals you cook are shabby. You insist on home caring your son until he's 3. Because you are an unemployed homemaker who can't afford daycare. You are just a parasite, using the child as an excuse not to work and leech off him. Do you want to hear more? That's enough. It seemed that Ben really was having an affair with this woman. Anyway, I'll discuss this with my husband. I pushed the woman out the door. Divorce him quickly, will you? Oh, and you can keep that crybaby. She threw out as a parting shot and finally left. What an awful situation. Troublesome father, isn't he? I muttered while comforting my son. Late at night, my husband Ben returned home. There's something I need to talk about. What is it? I'm tired. If it's about parenting, complain somewhere else. His reply was typically dismissive. Today, your girlfriend came to our house. Hearing this, Ben's face went pale instantly, and he started to get agitated. But he soon brazened it out and threatened. I'm the one earning the money here. I don't mind if we get divorced. A poor person like you can't survive without me. You're already overwhelmed with childcare, so there's no way you can work and raise a child. Even if you worked, your skills wouldn't be enough to support a child. It would be difficult for you. Basically, you should be grateful that a high-earning, highly educated genius like me would have you as a wife, who is only good-looking and incompetent. Oh, but now you look like an old lady. He continued to belittle me, ignoring his own infidelity. His words hurt me more than his affair. How did I ever marry such a man, and why did I devote myself to him? The only solace was my adorable son. From that day on, Ben blatantly kept in touch with his mistress, even going on trips with her. The mutual friend who introduced us to each other tried to persuade him to stop the affair. But he wouldn't listen. Even our friend was utterly dismayed by how infatuated Ben was with her. Eventually, Ben even stopped giving the monthly $1,000 he had been contributing to household expenses. Meanwhile, I was so worn out from parenting and stress that I fell ill. My son was still young and the house was a mess. Nevertheless, my husband, unconcerned, continued to spend time with her. Unable to expect any help from my husband, I used local childcare support and domestic help services to manage. Upon learning this, Ben said, "You're using community services instead of just hiring a babysitter or maid. Always scrimping and saving, it's so poor looking." At last, any remaining feelings I had for him were gone. I was starting to think about when to bring up divorce. Seeing me disheveled from childcare and looking at me as if I were something dirty, Ben said, "What's with that damaged hair? Can't you even take care of your hair? You're now a failure as a woman. I guess it's impossible. A poor person like you is no match for me. I'm going to live with my wealthy mistress, so let's get a divorce. She doesn't want the child, so you can have him. Saying this, he handed me the divorce papers. I had been waiting for this. I was internally overjoyed to avoid the hassle of initiating and the custody battle. With pleasure. Taking the divorce papers, I urged him to see the lawyer with me right away. Really? Is that okay? What? You're the one who brought it up, let's go now. Ben seemed to have thought I would be flustered. But seeing me prepared and spirited, he looked surprised. On the way back from law office, he said, I think my parents will want to see the child, so let's set up visits once a month. I'm starting a new family, so I don't really need to see him myself. I'll give you child support during the visits. How about $100 per month until he's 18? That should be enough for a poor person's son. I'm thinking about you properly even though we're getting divorced. I'm a kind person, right? His offer for child support was significantly below the standard rate. I was astounded at his ignorance or stinginess. It was unexpected that he would bring up child support himself. But I planned to demand property division as well, so he should be prepared. After getting home, I immediately began preparing to move out. While I was packing with my son, Ben spoke up. A jobless single mother can't pay rent, right? Can you even rent a place? You have no family to go back to. I'll be living in a huge apartment with my mistress. I'm canceling this house's lease by the end of the month. As a last act of mercy to a poor person like you, I'll send your belongings. You're probably moving to a rundown apartment near a supermarket, so leave your new address. I silently placed a paper with the address on the desk and left the house. A few days later, despite being out of state, Ben came to my new home with the movers. He seemed to have come to identify the place under the guise of guiding the movers, as the address was different from what he had expected. What? Why are you living here? Did you find a new man? My new residence was in an area known locally for its wealthy mansions. My father had died from an illness when I was young, and my mother raised me alone until she followed him 3 years later. Afterward, my maternal grandparents raised me. My grandmother passed away when I was 20. My grandfather, a well-known wealthy man, died 2 years before I married Ben. My mother was an only child, and I was the only grandchild for my grandparents. Thus, I inherited all of their assets. It's my own house. It was vacant because I was living out of state with you. Including other properties, my assets amount to about only $13 million. But I haven't been able to manage properly. Like you said, I'm just a parasitic poor person. So it's not as grand as you and your mistress's home, but it's a comfortable house. I said this sarcastically. Ben couldn't hide his shock and blurted out. What? Explain this to me. Thinking it a waste of time and energy to explain to this man, I remained silent. Then he said, that means it's part of my assets too, right? I should have rights to half, even after the divorce. It's joint property, so give me half, whether it's money or land. I was completely disgusted. Since it's premarital property, it doesn't count as joint property. I thought you, being highly educated and a genius, would know that. Who put such foolish thoughts in your head? You're pretty, so it must be your new boyfriend, right? Must be a lawyer. As I remained silent in dismay, he continued with more absurd statements. Finally, I said. I'm not relying on anyone, but I thought that statement was common sense. I did attend law school, so I have a bit of knowledge, though it's all quite basic. Ben then shouted. What? I thought you were just a high school grad. I never heard about this. You traitor. You seem to make decisions based on assumptions, maybe you've just assumed all along. And if anyone deserves to be called a betrayer, isn't it you who cheated? I responded calmly. What's with that way of talking? So you're rich, huh? Give me back the moving expenses. Pay for our moving expenses too, as compensation. As you previously said, I am just a poor person with only $13 million in assets. I can't compare to your wealthy mistress. So, as planned, I will rely on your mercy for the moving expenses. And I need to know what the compensation is for before I can pay it. I replied with a sarcastic tone. Unable to respond, he muttered to himself and left. The next day, he called me, in a panicked voice. What's going on? Why is the cancellation fee for the house amounting to $10,000? That's 2 months' rent. Why is the rent $5,000 a month? It's a detached house in a high-end residential area. Didn't you ever wonder? It was my house. But a month before our divorce, I transferred the ownership to someone else and we've been renting it under your name. You left the house matters to me, and you initiating the divorce really helped me out. It seems that Ben, who had always lived in his parents' home, had no idea about rent or even how much living costs. So I was living in your house and being supported by you. Even over the phone, I could sense his shock. A few days later, Ben called me again, in a flustered tone. Hey. What's this about $800 for child support and property division? You're rich, so you don't need it, right? He said. In fact, while preparing for the divorce, I had been gathering evidence of his verbal abuse and his failure to provide living expenses. The luxury diary Ben had prepared had, unbeknownst to him, become a record of our child's growth and also a record of his abusive behavior. This was also a key piece of evidence. Furthermore, I had hired a private investigator to obtain evidence of his infidelity. With a lawyer, I demanded a hefty sum for both his abuse and infidelity. At first, I hadn't planned to request child support. However, I am unemployed despite having assets, and I thought it was right for him, as a father, to contribute to his son. Thus I requested child support as well. Ben also said, "You must be dating that lawyer." Impossible. The lawyer I hired was a woman. Ben's assumptions were pitifully wrong. All I could do was laugh. Then, the investigation by the private investigator uncovered something even more shocking. That so-called president's daughter, Ben's mistress, was actually a marriage scam artist. Her story of being a president's daughter was a complete lie. She had tricked him into covering all her debts under the pretense that her father, supposedly the president, would pay him back as a wedding gift. And then she disappeared without a trace. Ben was in a panic. And now, with no money left, Ben said, "Let me stay until I find the next house." Then he added something ridiculous. "You own some apartments, right? Give me one for free. Out of consideration for us being ex-spouses." As the saying goes, a barking dog seldom bites. Ben kept barking. Realizing it was futile to respond, I listened silently until the end and then said, "I believe you've received the notice, but I have retained a lawyer. It's problematic for you to contact me this way. please communicate through the lawyer from now on. If you wish to have visitation with your son, please file for visitation mediation. Then I hung up. After that, I blocked all phone calls, emails, and other communications. It was a relief not to hear his nonsense and complaints. 3 years after the divorce, there has been no contact from him wishing for visitation. Honestly, I am relieved. I never want my son to meet his father or his family and relatives. The risk of kidnapping or Ben's traits of making assumptions passing on to my son is too troublesome. I never want to see, or have my son see, or interact with Ben again. Even now, I hear about him through mutual friends. Apparently, Ben lost all his assets, and with the child support and property division payments. He is living an uncomfortable life at his parents' house. His tendency to jump to conclusions caused trouble at work, leading to his dismissal. Now, he works tirelessly day and night at a low-paying job. Despite all he said about my looks, his hair is unkempt, and his shirts are always wrinkled. Meanwhile, I have built a new house and am living there with my son. Since Ben knew about the mansion, I sold it and built a new house on completely different land. I've managed to properly invest the other assets I had left unattended. And now I'm earning an income from them. I cherish every moment with my son as he grows, enjoying our days together. Also, coinciding with my son's entry to kindergarten, I re-enrolled in the law school. I had given up when I was younger, but now I'm working hard every day to become a lawyer. I'm using the money from Ben for my tuition. I want to become a reliable woman like my impressive lawyer who helped me. And to make my son proud of me. There's still so much life ahead. I have erased my ex-husband from my memory and plan to enjoy life with my wonderful son. You can't even do housework, you're useless. Pay me the property division too. As soon as he entered the hospital room, David half smiled and said this to me. Connected to many tubes. A girl I didn't know was standing beside him. David doesn't know that my total assets amount to $9 million. He should understand that getting a divorce in this situation is a matter of life and death for me as a housewife. Fine. Here, take the divorce papers. Yet, here he was, verbally abusing his wife in such a state. I, who had been carrying the divorce papers as a charm, pulled them out of the drawer and handed them to David. David smirked as he took them. This is goodbye. Then, I'm going to be happy with her, don't worry. Right, Sherry? David said this and put his arm around the girl's waist. The girl, called Sherry, leaned on David while scoffing at me. Ma'am. Oh, you're not a ma'am anymore. Take care, old lady. With those words as their cue, the two of them laughed and left the hospital room. However, their fun is only for now. Left alone in the hospital room, I burst out laughing. Today is Friday, so the divorce papers will be processed on Monday. Oh, I'm looking forward to 3 days from now. My name is Amy Gale. I am a 45-year-old housewife. My parents run an ordinary farm, and while I don't have any remarkable skills, I can proudly say that I have a wide repertoire of cooking. My husband David is the same age, and we were university classmates. Both of us had come from the countryside to New York, and since we both lived alone, I used to cook various dishes for David using vegetables and rice sent from home because he couldn't cook. People often said I had captured his heart through his stomach, and I was aware of it. David couldn't do any housework at all, and I had been taking care of him since our dating days. Because of that, I have been doing all the housework since we got married. Unfortunately, we were not blessed with children, but we enjoyed our life together as a couple. We both loved to eat, and on David's days off, we would go on little trips, driving around to eat delicious food. David was kind during the early years of our marriage, but about 3 years later, he became a typical authoritarian husband. Though he never resorted to physical violence, his way of speaking became harsh. And he would frequently say, "Who do you think is paying for this life?" It would be a lie to say his words didn't hurt, but even if I asked him to stop, he wouldn't listen, and I didn't have the energy to fight back. Being a housewife made me feel inferior, and I couldn't assert myself. After graduating from university, David joined a renowned company but resigned after about 5 years. He found a new job quickly but kept resigning after short periods. Because of this, our income was unstable, and I researched ways to save money to get by, though it was often hard to cover the living expenses. However, he has been getting along with his colleagues at the company. He started working at 2 years ago, and I was harboring a faint hope that he might stay there for a long time. Then one day, David came home earlier than usual. "I'm home. I quit my job again." "What, again?" My surprised response made David's eyebrows twitch. I hurriedly stopped what I was doing in the kitchen and ran to him. "I'm sorry. I was just surprised." No welcome or words of appreciation, just criticizing what your husband does. "You've become quite something." David's words made me tense up. He was in a very bad mood today. If I said something wrong, it could lead to serious trouble. "I'm sorry. As long as you understand." It seemed that my apology had somewhat eased his irritation. David, still openly grumpy, sat down on the sofa and turned on the TV. I quietly placed a beer and a glass on the table. "Would you like to eat, or would you like a bath?" "Food, and more drinks." "Understood." I continued to play the role of a submissive wife, not to upset David's mood. The real me used to be more assertive. But over the 14 years of being with David since we married at 28, I had almost completely stopped expressing myself. David filled his stomach with alcohol and snacks and fell asleep on the sofa, snoring. The table was so messy it looked like a child had eaten there. And I cleaned up the fallen beer bottles and food scraps from the floor. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Remembering the happy marriage I had dreamed of as a young girl, my true feelings slipped out. I glanced at David, but there was no sign he would wake up. I sighed in relief, yet I was terrified that this life would continue. Maybe it's time to consider a divorce. I started to face the problems I had been avoiding, and organized my schedule for the following days in my head. David began visiting the employment office the next day and quickly secured another job. While he was job hunting at the employment office, I went to the municipal office and got a divorce form, signing it on the spot. I wasn't planning to submit it yet, but I thought I'd keep it as a charm. The signed divorce form was hidden at the bottom of my usual bag. If discovered, I couldn't imagine what would be said. "Hey, where were you loitering while I was job hunting?" "I went to buy a resume at the stationery store." "Look, I thought you might need it." "Is that so?" "Unusually thoughtful of you." David, who had returned home before me, initially questioned me suspiciously but soon cheered up. I handed him the resume I had pre-purchased. After receiving it, David said he was going out for drinks with a friend and left. David's new job was at a solid company with better salary and benefits than any of his previous workplaces. After working for about 3 years and getting promoted, I was secretly hoping that David might finally stay with this job until retirement, as he seemed happy drinking in the evenings. It seems that David's department is in sales, and he often leaves home saying he has client dinners at night. I took full advantage of the brief moments of freedom to refresh myself and welcomed David home with a smile. One day, I received a call from my mother for the first time in a while. After listening to her excited story, I was shocked. $9 million. Yes, $9 million. The mountains and lands we originally owned. You don't need them anymore, right? When we had them appraised, they were worth $10 million. We can enjoy our retirement with just $1 million. So, I think you should consider restarting your life. My mother never thought highly of David, and since his domineering behavior worsened, she was worried about me not being able to visit my parents' home. I was surprised by the huge amount. Moreover, it seems my mother had transferred it to my name when she inherited it from my grandmother. And I was even more surprised to hear that there would be no inheritance tax. You better not tell David. But my mother, sensing my hesitation, said, "The final decision is yours," and hung up the phone. I knew I should report it immediately. Part of me thought that with this money, I could live freely, while another part wasn't ready to decide. About a week later, I had a traffic accident. Fortunately, the injuries were not life-threatening, but I needed to stay in the hospital for about a week. After storing my valuables in the hospital room's drawer, I immediately contacted David. "I'm sorry, I got injured." What about my dinner? While I felt like sighing at David worrying more about his meal than my injury, I continued talking. "It looks like I'll need to be hospitalized for a week. Sorry, but could you buy your meals somewhere until I'm discharged? Can't even prepare a meal for your husband, what a lazy wife." "Oh, wait, I'm coming over now." David said this and abruptly hung up the phone. I had intended to tell him about the inheritance tonight, but maybe it's better not to mention it. Looking at the many tubes attached to me during a precautionary checkup, I somehow felt that was the right decision. And soon, I would feel the correctness of that decision painfully. A wife who can't even do housework is useless. Pay me the property division too. As soon as he entered the hospital room, David said this to me, half smiling while I was connected to many tubes. A girl I didn't know was standing beside him. David doesn't know about my total assets of $9 million. He should understand that getting a divorce in this situation is a matter of life and death for me as a housewife. Fine. Here, take the divorce papers. Even so, I wouldn't want a man who verbally abuses his wife in such a state. I pulled the divorce papers I had been keeping as a charm from the drawer and handed them to David. David smirked as he received them. "This means goodbye. Then, I'm going to be happy with her, so don't worry. Right, Sherry?" David said this and put his arm around the girl's waist. The girl, called Sherry, leaned on David while scoffing at me. "Ma'am." "Oh, you're not a ma'am anymore. Take care, old lady." With those words as their cue, the two of them laughed and left the hospital room. However, their fun is only for now. Left alone in the hospital room, I burst out laughing. Today is Friday, so the divorce papers will be processed on Monday. Oh, I'm looking forward to 3 days from now. As I expected, there was no contact from David over the weekend, and it was very peaceful. The situation of not having to do anything since getting married made me restless, and the nurses kept telling me to rest. Then on Monday evening, my cell phone was flooded with calls from David. At first, I ignored it, but after 30 minutes of non-stop ringing, I got fed up and decided to answer. "Hey, you're being persistent with the calls. Hey. What is this about?" As soon as I picked up the phone, David started yelling. I couldn't help but laugh. David seemed infuriated by my laughter, half crazed, shouting something. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. The divorce papers haven't been processed. David was fuming on the other end of the phone. I kept giggling and responded to his complaints. Oh, I filed a non-acceptance notice before. Remember? You used to say let's divorce whenever we fought. I thought it wouldn't be right if you filed the divorce papers just on the spur of the moment. No, but I don't need it anymore. Withdraw it right now. David hesitated for a moment but soon ordered again. However, I'm no longer just going to listen to what David says. I can't do it until I'm discharged. It requires paperwork at the city office. Then get discharged now. Don't be unreasonable. His selfish demands only made me laugh even more. He probably plans to register his marriage with Sherry, whom he brought on Friday. David was clearly panicking. Oh, by the way, was her name Sherry? She's your mistress, right? Hey, that's rude to Sherry. Apologize. She's my new wife. Since we're not divorced yet, she's technically still a mistress. When I calmly responded to David's nonsensical remarks, he groaned oddly. I pressed on further. By the way, I'll have my lawyer contact you about the property division and compensation later.
Yeah.
Compensation. I'll make sure you pay for all this hassle. David seemed to misunderstand something and suddenly became cheerful. Normally, the person at fault pays compensation. I've always taken care of the household properly, and of course, I've never committed any acts of infidelity. It's clear that David is the responsible party. What are you misunderstanding? You're the one who should be paying compensation. Huh? David genuinely seemed not to understand, replying in a confused tone. He probably believes that by not taking care of him while I'm hospitalized, I am the one at fault. Even in the early era, being hospitalized wouldn't count as fault. I thought bitterly to myself as I patiently explained. What fault of mine? Just so you know, being unable to do household chores because I'm hospitalized does not constitute fault. You're neglecting to take care of me. If you were a child, this might be considered neglect. But you're an adult, capable of taking care of yourself. That's why this doesn't count as fault. If I say it's your fault, then it's your fault. Such childlike logic would surprise even a judge, I thought, as I metaphorically fell over in my mind. Had I really been so underestimated? As I remained silent, David said, "Finally got it, huh?" in a tone that made me bristle. Irritated, I responded. Don't you know the law? Fault is defined by specific reasons. Like infidelity, that is, having another woman despite having a wife. That's why Sherry is my new wife, and you're just an old tool, so it doesn't apply, does it? What are you talking about? Since you dated her secretly from me, it's clearly infidelity. David seemed unconvinced. He appeared determined not to change his attitude, convinced of his own righteousness. Anyway, please communicate through the lawyer from now on. Goodbye. Hey, Amy. I hung up without listening to David's protests. He called multiple times after that, but I ignored him until he finally gave up. Relieved, I thought I was done with him, but the next day it brought a new headache. Exasperated by the non-stop ringing of the phone from 9 a.m., I pressed the call button. On the other side, David was rattling off complaints like a machine gun. I couldn't fully grasp what he was saying, but it seemed to be about being unable to withdraw money from the account. If it was a joint account, David should have been able to withdraw without a problem. But if not, I remembered the bank card and passbook I had left at home and asked David, "Did you try to take money out of my account?" "Yes." "You're still hospitalized. So I thought I'd take the money in your account as compensation, but the card doesn't work." David was furiously ranting with his irrational claim. It seemed he hadn't understood what I had said yesterday. When I was determined to be hospitalized for a week, I had called the bank to make sure no withdrawals could be made from my account until I handled it in person after discharge. This was to prevent David from squandering the savings while I was away. And my decision was proving to be correct. After all, it's unthinkable to try to take money from an ex-wife's account without consent. However, David didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with his plan. And he demanded that I make the withdrawal possible immediately. What are you saying? We're strangers now. Why would I do as you say? You. What a person. Even if we say we're getting a divorce, the fact that you were my wife doesn't change. Act like a wife should and listen. We're practically strangers now, even if the divorce papers haven't been filed yet. Do you understand? Unfortunately, I don't have money to give to a stranger. Since I had never been so defiant before, David was shocked on the other end of the phone. But he quickly returned to his domineering tone. Just do as I say. Hurry up and send the money. Pay me compensation for not doing the housework. David had been considered smart when we first met, but sadly, he seemed to have intelligence without common sense. After 17 years of marriage, it was clear I had misjudged him, and I was exasperated. David seemed frustrated that I was not agreeing. Likely, he had run out of cash on hand and tried to tap into the household funds and the joint account. I spoke to him as if he were a small child. Listen, I'm no longer your obedient wife. The property division will be handled through a lawyer later. What? How dare you? I'm coming over now, wait for me. David said this and hung up. I didn't mind if he came to the hospital. But I had already asked the nurse station to let no one but my parents visit. Therefore, it was unlikely that David would make it to my room. David really did come to the hospital, but as expected, he was stopped at the nurse station. The phone rang repeatedly, but I ignored it until it switched to messages. And the screen was filled with a flood of notifications. I saved all of these as evidence and contacted the lawyer. After a while, the lawyer must have contacted David because the messages stopped coming. I thought this was the end, but I was soon proven wrong. The day before my discharge, a nurse came to me with a visitor request. A Miss Kathy Brown would like to visit you. What would you like to do? Kathy? Please let her in. Kathy was a friend I shared hobbies with. During my single days, she responded to my SNS posts about our food adventures. And we became friends because we lived nearby and often went out to eat together. After marriage, I had to cut back on such outings. But we kept in touch by having coffee and chatting regularly. Amy, are you okay? How's your injury? Yes, it's much better now. Thank you. Kathy expressed her concern as soon as she entered the room, warming my heart. Thinking back, since being hospitalized, I realized no one but my parents and hospital staff had shown concern for me. Amy, isn't this a really tough time for you? Huh, why? I haven't told anyone but my parents about my situation. So why does Kathy know? I was very curious and asked her. Then Kathy said something surprising. Wasn't Sherry Hansen, that young girl, having an affair with your husband? What? How do you know that? Wait, you know her? Actually, she's my niece. Kathy answered hesitantly, and I was speechless. I couldn't believe Kathy was Sherry's aunt. The room fell silent. It was the first time it had been quiet around Kathy, and it felt incredibly uneasy. Kathy was the first to break the silence. You see, Sherry suddenly told her mother she was getting married. And the man is 45 years old. Her mother was shocked. When she showed her mother his picture, it was your husband, Amy. I was so surprised. I've already told her. Amy, I'm really sorry my niece has caused you such trouble. Don't apologize, Kathy, it's not your fault. Kathy looked like she was about to cry as she looked at me. I thought for a moment and then asked Kathy. I plan to ask for compensation from Sherry as well. I can't compromise on that. But I wonder, does this mean our friendship is over? Not at all. I want to keep being friends with you, Amy. I'll make sure Sherry pays the compensation. Both her mother and I can't forgive what she's done. We'll keep a close eye on her. I was very grateful for Kathy's words. Kathy and I have been friends for over 20 years. I don't want to lose a precious friend because of my awful husband and his affair. I told Kathy about a meeting planned for tomorrow and that I wanted her to come. Kathy happily agreed. And she even offered to provide photos that could serve as evidence of the affair. The next day, right after being discharged, I went to a private restaurant with my lawyer, where David and Sherry had already arrived, gorging on expensive French cuisine. I was speechless at their self-centeredness, and David smirked at me. Finally showed up. Did you bring the money? You're paying for this too. David continued to eat as he spoke to me. Sherry also kept eating, smirking alongside him. I decided to fight back. Please handle the payment yourselves. Also, I'm here to demand compensation from both of you. How long are you going to sulk? You're really not cute. Ignoring David's rude remarks, my lawyer and I sat down and showed evidence that David was at fault. We presented legal documents about fault and materials about compensation and asset division. Lastly, I showed the photos Kathy had given me of Sherry and David entering a hotel with another man Sherry didn't know. What? Why? Hey. Sherry, what is this? David and Sherry were unsettled by the photos, and they finally stopped eating. Just then, Kathy entered at the perfect moment. I took those photos. Kathy. Sherry seemed confused to see her aunt here. Then Kathy coldly looked down at Sherry and David, and spoke calmly about wanting them to realize how low their actions were. Also, Sherry. You said you were pregnant with his child. But with this behavior, it's unclear whose child it is. No, I mean. Sherry faltered at Kathy's comment. It was the first time I heard she was pregnant, and looking at her today, I wouldn't have guessed she was. But from David's reaction, it seemed she had indeed claimed to be pregnant. So you are pregnant. In that case, we will proceed with a DNA test and then add that to the compensation. No, please. I lied about being pregnant, I'm sorry. Sherry suddenly confessed and apologized. She had been looking for an older man who would provide money, and David had been her target. He bought her brand items, and said once they were married, she wouldn't have to work and could do whatever she liked. So she thought she could be a housewife and casually see other men as she pleased. She lied about being pregnant because he showed no signs of actually divorcing. David just gaped, stunned. I'm really sorry. But I can't pay any compensation. I don't have the money. I'll pay Amy first. You will work part-time every month and pay me back. No playing around until you've paid it all back. No way. Sherry looked utterly defeated. Kathy said she would bring her sister to apologize again later and led Sherry out of the restaurant. David, who had been in a daze, suddenly tried to sweet-talk me. Hey, it seems I was deceived. I can't live without you, Amy. We still have the divorce papers here, can't we start over? You've been a housewife all this time, you can't start working now, can you? I listened to David's plea with a cold gaze, but none of his words touched me. After he finished, I responded with a smile. I can live quite well without you. So I'll take the divorce papers now and file them right after this. Also, I haven't told you yet, but my total assets are currently $9 million. So, I can live comfortably until my old age without working, please don't worry. $9 million. Why didn't you tell me about that kind of money? I was going to tell you, but you started shouting about divorce. I'll definitely demand compensation. And this money is my personal inheritance, so it's not subject to division of property. It has nothing to do with you, right? David looked at me with a look of despair. My lawyer quickly handed him the documents and a pen to sign. After that, my lawyer and I left and immediately filed the divorce papers. Thus, a chapter of about 20 years of marriage came to an end. Later, the compensation was transferred to me in Sherry's name in one lump sum. Kathy told me that Sherry's mother, having learned of the situation, was furious. She had Sherry take a break from university to work at a relative's inn without break until she repaid the compensation. As for David, his in-laws disowned him after learning about the divorce. They told him they wouldn't help at all, and he reluctantly took out a loan and paid it off all at once. It also came out that he had been going to the hotel with Sherry during work hours. He was fired from his job and is now working multiple jobs on construction sites to pay off his debts. As for me, even though I came into a significant sum, I didn't know what to do with it and donated half to charity. With the remaining money, I moved to the countryside and am enjoying a luxurious single life. Kathy and I continue to interact, and on days off, we go out to eat or take little trips. Since we both planned to remain single, I suggested perhaps we should share a room. Initially hesitant, Kathy couldn't resist the lure of shared mail orders and my cooking, and she agreed. Next week, we'll start moving, and I'm excited about the new life ahead. From now on, I want to live honestly and enjoy myself.
My name is Jenny White. I am 27 years old and a housewife. I married my husband, Alex, who is 3 years older than me, 3 years ago. We've struggled to have children, but our relationship had been relatively good. However, that all changed due to my husband's actions. Instead of showing remorse, you present me with divorce papers. Are you sane? The action that ruined our relationship was my husband's affair with my childhood friend, Kristen. When confronted about the affair, he showed no remorse and instead presented me with prepared divorce papers, declaring, "Why should I have to be the one to apologize? The affair was because of your infertility. I get so tired of coming home to this might work or that might be good. I'm sick of it. I got married when I was 24. We wanted children and started trying to conceive immediately after our wedding. Being young, I thought it would be easy to conceive without any trouble. However, it didn't go as planned, and I didn't get pregnant at all in these 3 years." He justified his affair with Kristen by blaming it on this. People normally can have children without any trouble. But you've wasted so much time and money because of you. As I vented to her, we ended up in that kind of relationship. I don't see why you should blame me. And yet, how could you? No matter what you say, I am going to divorce you and remarry Kristen. Kristen is now pregnant with my child. What? My child that couldn't be conceived with you. Happened immediately when I was with Kristen. That's why I intended to divorce you and remarry her even before you confronted me about the affair. It just worked out well. As it turns out, my childhood friend Kristen is pregnant with my husband's child. It seems he was planning to choose her over me from the start. I contacted Kristen, but she repeated the same things my husband had said. disappointed by the actions of my childhood friend. I realized arguing was futile and accepted the divorce. That was 32 years ago. I am now 59, and I barely remember those times. Yet, fate has a strange way of reuniting people, and I unexpectedly ran into them again. Is that Jenny? What? Indeed. It is Jenny. What are you doing here? Do you know where you are? This is the maternity clinic, the maternity clinic. What do you need at a maternity clinic? Are you still not giving up on having children at your age? I was at a maternity clinic that had just opened last year in our hometown. The fact that I, infertile, was at a maternity clinic seemed amusing enough to them to point and laugh openly. We haven't seen each other in a while, but you're still the same. I understand the desire for children as a woman. But you're really making the doctors cry, aren't you? If you're infertile and childless at your age, there's no hope left, right? You might even be getting taken advantage of. Letting you hope while draining your money. That's possible. Whatever you say now doesn't affect me anymore. But maybe you should look around? This is a maternity clinic, as you say. It's a hospital. If you can't be quiet, please leave once your business is done so you don't bother other people. Their words echoed in the quiet waiting room. And the other patients frowned upon hearing them. Unperturbed by the reactions around them, they looked at each other and snickered. We'd love to leave, but we can't just yet. Actually, the daughter Kristen was pregnant with back then is now pregnant herself. We're here for her checkup. So, we can't leave until her appointment is over. I see. Moreover, the doctor seeing her is the head of this maternity clinic. The hospital is new, just opened last year. And the head is only 31 years old but is reputed to be very skilled. Being supportive during the unstable times of pregnancy. But Jenny, you wouldn't know about that, would you? Sorry. The two of them laughed mockingly at my silence. Their disdainful and belittling nature unchanged from 32 years ago. Witnessing this, I decided it was time to reveal a truth they were unaware of. I'm proud as a mother to hear such praise for my son. What? Son? Mother? You can't possibly have a child, can you? Have you finally lost your mind from wanting children so much? When did I say I didn't have a child? After you and I divorced, I remarried a man I met 6 months later. I found out I was pregnant soon after. And the son I had then is the one who opened this hospital. What? That's impossible. You must be lying just to show off. There's no way she, who didn't get pregnant even once in 3 years, could remarry and get pregnant immediately. Even if she did have a son, do you really think he could become a doctor? She wouldn't have the earnings to send him to medical school. That's all just bluff. There's no need to pay her any mind. It was then. Ah, Mrs. White, were you here? I've been looking for you. Didn't you hear the call at the reception? What? Actually, I need to talk to both of you about your daughter. Mom. Mom? Wait, what exactly is? Didn't I tell you earlier? He's my son. There's nothing strange about my son calling me Mom. Yes, today my sister came for a prenatal checkup. My husband is overseas on a business trip, so Mom came to accompany her. Mom, Erica's checkup will be almost over soon. The doctor said everything is going well. That's good to hear. I'll have to contact my husband later. The two were shocked as they watched our exchange. What did you say? You have 2 children. She must be the stepchildren from your remarriage, right? That's the only thing that makes sense. Still doubting? My son and daughter are both truly mine, born to me. That's impossible. Then my son responded to their conversation. Stepchildren from a remarriage, what do you mean? Wait, Mom, you knew Mr. White? My son knew I was divorced, but of course, he didn't know my ex-husband's name or face. He looked puzzled and asked me. They're not just acquaintances, they are my ex-husband and my former childhood friend. I don't know what fate it is, but we met here for the first time in 32 years. I never wanted to see them again. Then my son's expression changed. Oh, is this about that time you were treated as infertile? And he chose your childhood friend? You told your own son about that. I didn't tell him. But he found out when he was in middle school. He found the documents when I was seeking compensation through a lawyer. He asked me what it was all about. So, I told him. What exactly you two did. But still. Well, what happened in the past doesn't concern me. It happened before I was born. But what do you think about cheating because of infertility? We have many patients who come here struggling with infertility. Most couples work hard together to address the issue. Men who blame infertility on women and cheat are rare. But actually, the causes of infertility are nearly equal between men and women. Most men who cheat blaming infertility are mistaken. We often hear stories where upon testing, it turns out there was nothing wrong with the wife, but the problem was with the husband. I can understand not wanting to accept that you might be the cause of infertility. But to cheat without even testing and blaming it on the woman. As a doctor and as a man, I think it's the lowest thing you can do. Especially with your wife's childhood friend, it's unthinkable. But, well, thanks to Mr. White divorcing her, I exist as I am today. It's complicated, though. And it seems like Mom is happy now. She married a lawyer, and then my sister and I were born. What did you just say? A lawyer, father? Yes, my father is a lawyer. He was a paralegal at a law firm when he met my mother. He became a lawyer quite soon after that. Right? No way, that law firm is. Yes, I met him at the law firm I consulted about you. He was working there as a paralegal. He was assisting a lawyer. After our interactions ended, he approached me, and we were married within 6 months. Just now, you said my son couldn't possibly become a doctor. Indeed, my earnings alone might not have been enough to send my son to a university with a medical school. But by marrying my husband and combining our efforts, we were able to send our son to medical school. Of course, it was possible because of my son's own hard work. We just supported him from behind. I am grateful to my husband and children. They have given me happiness I couldn't have imagined when you left me. At my words, the two were speechless and fell silent. By the way, you mentioned earlier that you were looking for them. Is something wrong? Is there something you want to know about your daughter? Oh yes, that was it. Do you both know your blood types? Blood type? Yes, there's something I need to confirm. I'm A. I'm O. What? What's the matter? Do you know your daughter's blood type? Yes. I believe my wife said she's a type. I think she thinks she's a type too. What about it? While they were talking, I glanced at Kristen, who was sweating profusely and holding her face in her hands. Then, my son's next words revealed the reason. Actually, when we did a blood test on your daughter, we discovered that her blood type is not A but B. What? In the early stages of pregnancy. We conduct tests to ensure there are no risks to the mother and child during the pregnancy. We also test the mother's blood type. This is also to ensure quick response in case an emergency transfusion is needed. As your husband mentioned earlier, your daughter said she was type A. However, we can't just transfuse type A blood based on that statement alone. If by any chance she had a blood type that couldn't receive type A, it would be a serious problem. And this time, to prevent any such emergencies, we tested your daughter's blood type and found out it is not A, but B. That's impossible. What did my daughter say about this? We haven't spoken to your daughter and her husband yet. There could be various circumstances. So we thought we'd check with the parents first since they were at the hospital. We had the reception call you earlier. My son informed them that their daughter's blood type, B, could not have come from two parents who are A and O. The ex-husband stood there stunned. What does this mean? Why would B type arise from A and O types? It must be a mistake. It has to be. That's the only explanation. Were you cheating? What? With some B-type man? What are you starting now? There's no way I did such a thing. But the fact is, she's said to be B-type. B-type can only come from a parent who is B or AB type. Since we're A and O, we don't have the genes for a B-type child. Explain what this means. The ex-husband's voice echoed in the waiting room, creating a complete scene. Mr. White, please calm down. How can I be calm? For 32 years, I thought she was my daughter. And now there's a suspicion she might be someone else's. Who exactly is? By the way, wasn't Kristen's longtime boyfriend B-type? At these words, Kristen appeared shocked. What are you saying? Remember, you had been dating him for nearly 10 years just before you decided to remarry my ex-husband. I think he said he was type B. Why do you know my boyfriend's blood type? We once went out together, remember? On our way back, we saw a sign for a blood donation bus. He casually mentioned, they're short on type B blood right now. And I'm type B, maybe I should donate. He actually went to donate. So I remember clearly. You, with that man? It's not like that. She is truly your child. Then why is her blood type B? Think about it. It's impossible for two parents with types A and O to produce a type B child. Were you cheating? To catch my attention, did you pretend her boyfriend's child was mine? No. Believe me. She is definitely type A. She was tested at birth. The mistake is with this doctor. They must be confusing her results with someone else's. Talking big about opening a practice so young. Maybe he's a quack? Just a moment ago, you were bragging about how skilled and reputable the doctor handling your daughter is. You change your opinions too quickly. Busy person, aren't you? But that's because. And it's far-fetched to say that the child is his. What do you mean by that? You knew, didn't you? What? That it wasn't me who was infertile, but him. What are you talking about? Why would I be infertile? Didn't our son just say? Infertility isn't just a woman's issue. But why am I supposed to be infertile? That has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with it. The doctors told me clearly back then. Indeed, it was my husband, not I, who was diagnosed with infertility at that time. The words I spoke turned their faces pale with shock. It's a lie, right? It's a joke, right? It's neither a lie nor a joke. But that's never been mentioned. What are you talking about? Have you forgotten? They tested me and found no cause of infertility. So they suggested your husband should also be tested. You were tested, weren't you? I told you that the issue was with you. I never heard such a thing. I definitely told you. But you never took my words seriously. All infertility is the woman's fault. A man could never be the cause of infertility. Because it's the woman who has to get pregnant. That's what you used to say. But I kept telling you to go to the hospital with me over and over. But you insisted it was my fault. At that time, it came out that you were cheating on me with my childhood friend Kristen. When confronted, Kristen said she was pregnant with your child. The doctors had told you that without treatment, natural conception was almost impossible for you. I wondered how you could have easily gotten Kristen pregnant, but it was just as I thought. Are you really saying that? I wouldn't lie about something like this. So, the reason I couldn't get pregnant during our 3 years of marriage was because you were infertile. I've given birth to 2 children since then. That's the proof. It can't be true. It's been 32 years, so I don't know what has changed since then. But at that time, I was certainly told that was the case. Such a thing. If what you are saying is true, then that child might not be mine after all. If it bothers you that much, why not get a DNA test? That might clear up any doubts you have. And Kristen, you must have had an inkling, right? That despite trying, you couldn't get pregnant. Perhaps he was also a reason for the infertility. So, you got pregnant by your boyfriend at the time and claimed it was his child? Kristen, no. That's not true. That child is definitely ours. After raising her for 32 years, why would you get swayed by what your ex-wife says now? Besides, just because it was almost impossible doesn't mean it was absolutely impossible, right? There might still be a chance. Just because you were told you are infertile doesn't mean there is 0 chance of natural conception. There is still a possibility. See, I told you. But if you're going to bring up this topic, as I mentioned earlier, it's impossible for parents with blood types A and O to have a child with blood type B. That's 100% certain. So, what does that mean? If either of your blood types was recorded incorrectly, there might be a chance of having a child with blood type B. But if your blood types are definitely A and O, it's difficult to say. But it's highly likely that she is not your child. That's basically what it means. How can you say that? Do you think it's okay for a gynecologist to tell someone that's not your child? People do ask sometimes. Patients ask if it's possible for 2 type A parents to have a type B child. If both parents are type A, the child can only be A or O. Conversely, if one parent is A and the other is B, then the child could be of any blood type. In such cases, it's my duty as a doctor to convey the truth. Fudging or lying can lead to serious issues for everyone involved later on. When the son explained this, Kristen turned bright red and began trembling. So, you mean the child might actually? As I said earlier, if there was a mistake with the parents' blood types, it wouldn't be strange for the child's blood type to be different. Is it possible for there to be a mistake with the parents' blood types? Sometimes the blood type tested at birth can be wrong. Or perhaps you misunderstood the blood type you were told by your parents when you were a child. But it's unlikely there was a mistake with the mother's blood type, especially since blood tests are done during the early stages of pregnancy. Like with your daughter. That means the mistake might be with the father. Have you ever had a major illness or surgery? I had surgery after an accident in my 20s. Then they would have tested your blood type. Have you ever been told there was a mistake with your blood type? No. I see. Then there's only one possibility. The father must have the B gene. Enough. Stop it. I've been quiet listening to you. Talking about someone's daughter as if she's a child born from an affair. Do you think you have a duty to tell the truth? Was there any need to blab about such private matters? I'll sue you for defamation. Even if she turns out to be your biological child, a child born from an affair isn't wrong. Because she was conceived through an affair with my husband. What did you say? And if you're thinking of suing me for defamation, you should be prepared to be sued yourselves. What? In this busy maternity clinic waiting room. This isn't a place for the infertile. It's pitiful that you can't have children. Who said those words to me? Well. At that moment, the two finally noticed the piercing stares of those around them. There were couples struggling with infertility and women suffering from illnesses. Their cruel words had everyone glaring at them. So, that was, Go ahead and sue if you want. Do as you like. But don't forget you've done even worse. Cornered, she glared at me and snapped. What are you saying I've done? Ganging up and blaming me like this. I feel sick. What do you mean that's not your child? So what if my daughter's blood type turned out to be B? Children with blood type B might be born from A and O type parents, right? It was then. Wait, what does that mean about my blood type being B? You said a child can't be born from two type A and O parents, right? Their daughter and her husband, having finished their consultation, had come to the waiting room after hearing the commotion. Nicole, please tell me clearly. No, that's not it. It's just a mistake by the doctor or something. A mistake? That can't be right, can it? We've had proper tests at the hospital. Doctor, am I really type B? Yes. Definitely type B. And a child cannot be born from A and O types, right? That's correct. Nicole? Mom, are you listening to me? I think you should listen to my story first. Am I not your child? No, that's not true. That can't be. Then why was I born with type B from A and O type parents? That's strange, isn't it? No, because. And you said earlier. That mom's old boyfriend was type B. Could he be my real dad? That's. Answer me. How can this be happening when I'm about to have my first child? Why is there a doubt now that I might not be your child? With that, she broke down in tears. My heart ached seeing her cry. Pregnancy is a mentally unstable period already. To discover that she might have a different blood type from her parents at such a time. Nicole. Let's go home and talk. It's too public here, and we can't discuss this calmly. So. Don't touch me. Just leave me alone for a bit. I'll contact you when I've calmed down. Until then, I don't want to see either of you. Saying that, the daughter and her husband turned to leave. Wait, Nicole. Hey, Nicole. Ignoring her parents, she and her husband headed for the exit. And her parents hurriedly followed. This has turned into a huge mess. Did I maybe say something wrong? I never thought it would turn out like this. No, you didn't. This is their own doing. It was bound to be revealed eventually. It just so happened that the truth came out today after 32 years. As I watched their retreating figures, I relayed this to my son. Later, my son shared more news with me. The other day, Mrs. Ito came to our hospital. It seems that they did a DNA test after that, and it turned out the husband wasn't the father. I suspected as much. But why did she come to you? Well, after that, they discussed it as a family. They ordered a DNA kit online and tested it. And the result showed 99% certainty that there was no parental relationship between the husband and the daughter. She insisted the results were definitely wrong and demanded our hospital conduct another DNA test properly. I told her the DNA testing kits she used were highly reliable, and repeating the tests wouldn't change the outcome. She just wouldn't listen, kept saying this can't be happening. This will lead to divorce, our family will fall apart. So what ended up happening? We did the test. But of course, the results didn't change. The daughter was 99% not his child. When she saw the results, the wife exploded in anger. She couldn't believe it, accused us of lying, and started causing a scene. Eventually, we couldn't handle it ourselves, and we had to call the police to take her away. That must have been tough. It was more than tough. We see all sorts of people at the hospital, but that was unprecedented. With a heavy sigh, he recounted the events. A few months later, I received a call from an unknown number on my smartphone. It was her ex-husband. His voice was grave as he spoke. After that, I did a DNA paternity test with my daughter. And just like you said, we are not biologically related. I never imagined this could happen. Before I met you that day, it never crossed my mind. Then things got messy with Kristen. In the end, she confessed the child was from her boyfriend at the time. She was distressed he hadn't proposed, and we got married. She was jealous and took me from you, thinking if she got pregnant by me, who was struggling with infertility, it would be easy to take me away. But she couldn't get pregnant, ended up back with her boyfriend. Got pregnant by him, and then lied that it was my child. For 32 years. I see. He thought I didn't know about Kristen storming into my son's gynecology clinic. So he shared the entire story with me. In the end, I divorced Kristen. Moreover, after hearing the whole story, our daughter, she decided to cut ties, blocked my calls. My parents are gone, and I have no siblings. I'm all alone now. That's unfortunate. But why tell me all this? That's just it. If you had listened to me earlier, maybe it wouldn't have ended like this. But it's too late for regrets now. This is the future you chose back then. After that conversation, I never saw him again. Where he is or what he's doing now, I don't know, but he surely regrets his choices deeply.